Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this Electors special meeting. We acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their elders past and present. I would like to advise everyone that the audio of this meeting is being live streamed to YouTube. I request everyone to please turn off your mobile phones, and I remind you that any recording of the meeting proceedings and photography within the community hall is prohibited unless prior approval has been granted. With that, welcome. The first item on the agenda tonight is the declaration of opening, and I declare this Electors special meeting open at 1 minute past 6 p.m. Item 2 is a disclaimer, and the City of South Perth disclaims any liability for any loss arising from any person or body relying on any statement, discussion, recommendation or decision made during this meeting. Item 3 is announcements from the presiding member, which is me. Before I begin, I'm aware that people may very well have strong feelings about the subject matter for tonight. So I'm going to ask that everyone please be respectful and treat everyone else as you would wish to be treated yourself. Let's play nice and remember that we're a community, even if we don't always agree with everyone else 100% of the time. So, this Electors special meeting has been called as a result of a petition of electors received on 11 October 2022. It has been brought to my attention that many people have received a yellow pamphlet, in fact I saw a few in the crowd tonight, with the words "Interested in Swim Complex South Perth" and a question mark printed on one side, and the words "Ask your questions" and the details of tonight's meeting on the back. Just for the avoidance of doubt, a discussion of the RAF project is not the purpose of tonight's meeting. Tonight's meeting concerns the matters set out in the petition of electors received on 11 October 2022. And the purpose of that petition requesting this electors special meeting is to, open quote, allow the community to express that they have no confidence in Deputy Mayor D'Souza, Councillor Choi, Councillor Manolis, Councillor Brenda Abrandis, Councillor Navard for A, setting a disturbing precedent which fundamentally impinges upon the democratic rights of the South Perth community by voting to not accept a community petition with almost 2,500 signatures. B, voting to breach the city's funding agreement with the Commonwealth, thereby putting at risk $20 million in grants funding and incurring a liability for ratepayers to pay back with interest grants funds already received and potentially increasing rates. And C, failing to implement the city's strategic community plan, end quote. That's what the community petition had to say. So this meeting has been advertised in accordance with the Local Government Act 1995 and the Local Government Administration Regulations 1996. The procedure to be followed at this electors meeting is determined by the presiding member, which is me. So the following will occur. There will be a presentation of 15 minutes by the lead petitioner, followed by a motion moved by the lead petitioner. After that, general business related to the purpose of the meeting, including public statements, public question time and motions will take place. And just so everyone's aware, there will be no preambles, no reasons or debates on any of those motions. I'm simply going to call for a seconder after a motion has been moved and then put the motion to the vote. So, on the subject of speaking, electors who have submitted statements or questions prior to the meeting will be called to the microphone first. Each elector will be allocated a total of 3 minutes to ask up to 3 questions or make a statement. Following this, all those that registered before entering the meeting will be called forward. All of the questions and statements must relate to the purpose of the meeting and they're to be directed to myself as the presiding member. I can then refer it to a councillor, to the Chief Executive Officer, or the relevant City Director to answer. When you're called to the microphone, please clearly state your name and address before commencing. When making a statement or asking a question, please ensure that you extend due courtesy and respect to the elected members and the city officers and the other members of the public who are present tonight. Please make sure that any statement or question doesn't contain any material that is offensive, objectionable or defamatory. And I am going to ask, we've got a big audience tonight that potentially might make a lot of noise. I'm going to ask that everyone please refrain from interjecting, booing, clapping or otherwise creating any kind of disturbance. I'll issue a warning first, but if that isn't heeded, then I'm going to have to start asking people to leave, and I really don't want to do that. So please be respectful, play nice, and follow the rules. Voting. Each elector who is present is entitled to one vote on each matter to be decided at the meeting. You don't have to vote, but if you'd like to vote and you're an elector, then you can. All decisions are to be made by a simple majority of votes, and voting is to be conducted so that no one's vote is secret. As defined in the Local Government Act 1995, an elector in relation to a district or a ward means a person who is eligible to be enrolled to vote at elections for the district or ward. So if you're not an elector, please don't vote. So the meeting will now commence with a presentation from the lead petitioner, Mr. George Watts. So, Mr. George Watts, welcome, and I invite you to the microphone. And I've just been informed that our State Member of Parliament, Mr. Jeff Baker, is present. Welcome, Mr. Oh, there he is, up the back. Welcome, very good to see you here. And just a reminder, Mr. Watts' motion will be heard as part of his presentation. All other motions from the floor will be heard later in the meeting after public questions and public statements. So with that, welcome Mr. Watts, and the microphone is yours.
So is this close enough, or do I need to move it a bit? Or?
Maybe move it a little bit closer to yourself, yes.
Checked it. Thank you firstly, all electors here for attending tonight. I appreciate the time and effort out of everyone's busy lives to get to these things. I would also like to thank the City of Perth administration for their efforts in organising tonight, and indeed what must have been an incredibly busy period in the past month or so with the number of council meetings that have occurred. I would also like to thank the councillors for their attendance and Mayor Greg Milner for presiding over this meeting. My name is George Watts. I've been a resident of Carrawara for the last 10 years, where my wife Kate and I have chosen to raise our family. I lived in Como for 10 years prior to that, and I run a small engineering consultancy based in Como. I live, work, and would play in South Perth, if only there were the facilities to do so. So why has this meeting been called? This meeting has been called as the last option available to have the voice of the community heard. This meeting was called because the City of South Perth councillors who voted to breach a federal funding agreement, which has put $20 million funding for the RAF project at risk. This meeting was called because the same councillors then rejected a valid community petition about their decision, which had the largest number of verified signatures ever presented to the city. This meeting was called because the actions of those councillors have left the city unable to implement its strategic community plan to provide recreation and aquatic facilities which meets the community's needs. And these actions have really shaken public confidence in those councillors. But as many of you know, there have been further developments since this meeting was originally called last month. Just last week, the Council unanimously voted to develop a new plan for delivery of the RAF in 3 separate stages. All of the councillors expressed their support for the vision of the RAF, and most of the councillors acknowledged the community's right to be heard in the delivery of that vision. So tonight, this meeting gives the 5 councillors a wonderful opportunity to consolidate the progress made last week, to publicly commit to delivering a RAF in a way which listens and responds to community feedback along the way, and which recognises that, although councillors are entitled to their own opinions, in a complex project like this, as part of good governance, they'll often need to be guided by the expert advice of their administration and the professional consultants whose job it is to manage the project on an operational level. That having opinions isn't the same as having expertise in all areas, and that good decision-making and good governance is based on giving due weight to the advice of the people who are best qualified to give it. So, evidence-based decision-making and community engagement. I know that's something that everyone in this room can agree is important for the future of the RAF and for the future of this council. And I'm sure that's something we can all get behind with the motion I'm about to present. As I said, a lot has changed in the past week. The original motion for this meeting was a vote of no confidence in Councillors De Souza, Choi, Manolis, Brender-Abandis and Navard. However, given recent developments, I'm really pleased to now be able to present an amended motion, one by which these councillors can restore public confidence. So if the motion could be put up now. And I believe I have to read it. Yep. So the motion reads that the electors of the City of South Perth note public confidence in Deputy Mayor De Souza, Councillor Choi, Councillor Manolis, Councillor Brender-Abandis and Councillor Navard has been undermined by their following conduct. Voting to breach the City's federal $20 million Recreation and Aquatic Facility RAF funding agreement by not appointing a project manager against the advice of City administration that this appointment would not involve any additional risk or cost, but failing to do so would create a high risk to the project, jeopardise RAF funding, severely damage the City's reputation, endanger future grants to the City, incur further unnecessary costs such as re-tendering and cause delay. Voting not to accept a community petition regarding this breach, which had over 2,000 verified signatures and which was determined to be valid by the City administration, and, as a result, failing to progress implementation of the City's strategic community plan. However, the community notes the Council's statements of support for the RAF and their acknowledgement of the community's right to democratically petition Council at the Special Council meeting on 1st of November 2022. We therefore seek the Council's commitment to the following in order to restore public confidence. Be open and accountable to and represent all of the community of the district, listening and responding respectfully to the community by answering and returning phone calls and replying to emails in a timely manner and accepting petitions which are considered valid by the City administration. Base their decisions on relevant evidence-based matters, including giving appropriate weight to the expert advice of the City's administration and experienced specialist consultants, and support an approach to RAF development which maximises the potential for all three stages to be delivered in a timely manner and which avoids further delayed costs. So as I said, I think these are all very reasonable requests that I'm sure everyone can agree on. I don't want to dwell too much on the past, but it is important for context and for accountability. It's important to note what we don't want to see repeated. Let's start with a decision to not appoint a project manager in June 2022. This was a procedural requirement of the $20 million federal funding agreement for the RAF. If it had been done, it would have entitled the City to its next milestone payment of $7 million. The project management contract was structured so that no work would happen and no payment would be made until the Council made further decisions on the project. The contract could be terminated at any time at no cost to the City. This was a no-cost, no-risk decision. The administration warned that if a PM wasn't appointed, the federal funding could be cancelled and the City could be asked to pay back funds already received with interest. Council was also warned this move would damage important relationships with the federal and state governments, jeopardising funding not only for this project but potentially for future projects. This was identified as a high-risk decision. The reasons given at that meeting by the Five for not accepting the administration's recommendation can be best summed up as fiscal responsibility. But how could a decision that puts $20 million at risk, an amount which equates to up to a quarter of the entire project cost, be considered fiscally responsible? We heard a lot about escalating costs, but the project costings hadn't been done yet. Any cost escalations were still to be defined, and then a plan for dealing with them could be considered. It may well have been that the project would have needed to pivot towards something like the three-stage approach that is being considered now. But that decision would have been arrived at with a better understanding of costs, $20 million in federal funding secured, and with a state government looking on at the process in the knowledge that the City was 100% committed to trying to get this project to work. Instead, we have $20 million of funding still at risk, community confidence in the Council in tatters, close to 9 months of time wasted come March next year, with the project having progressed no further, and close to $200,000 spent by the administration in trying to renegotiate with the federal funders and progress state government funding discussions with the RAF's future under a cloud. It should be noted that I've never at any stage suggested the RAF project should proceed at any cost, as some have implied the community is calling for. What I have said all along is that the project must allow a diligent development pathway to be given the best opportunity to succeed. This is Council's mandate under its own strategic community plan. The June 2020 decision led me to embark upon running a petition in protest. What I want to point out at this juncture is the amount of effort that went into this petition. It was a massive undertaking, countless hours, hundreds of conversations with people, and not just me and my family. There was a large army of people that put their hand up and did their bit. Some canvassing hundreds of people, some just their street. But the common factor here was the community pulling together and in a very short space of time resulted in a petition with the largest number of verified signatures ever presented to the City of South Perth. And let's be very clear here. The petition was accepted as valid by the City's administration, both in form and in language. There was a deliberate choice to run the petition in person and not online, as this ticked every box deemed necessary of it by the City of South Perth administration and would ensure that the voice of all those who signed it was heard, even though I'm confident we could have got many more signatures if we have run it online. I was under no illusion that this voice would convince councillors to change their minds. I was fully prepared for the potential of the 5 to ignore the views presented in the petition. What I was not prepared for was the attempt to block the democratic rights of the community to express these views. To reiterate, never has a valid petition been rejected by council. To my knowledge, in no other local government has this happened. Listening to the community, their constituents, is at the very heart of the roles of elected officials. This seems to have been forgotten. Following the decision to reject the petition, I sent an email to all of the councillors asking, why was the petition rejected? As the lead petitioner, it was my duty to provide the almost 2,500 people who signed the petition reasons for why their voice had been dismissed. This reasonable request was answered by only one of the 5 councillors, Councillor Jennifer Navard, and her reason was, to paraphrase, she didn't agree with the content of the petition. This is clearly unacceptable. Councillors may not agree with what is being asked for in a petition, but they have a duty to consider it. But at least Councillor Navard responded. None of the others did. At the special council meeting last week, a few councillors did offer up reasons as to justify their actions. None of the reasons can be considered anything but an attempt at avoiding responsibility for their decision, as each reason given just simply does not make sense or does not stand up to the smallest amount of scrutiny. But I suggest that perhaps the bigger picture has been lost here. Why is there any discussion as to why the petition was rejected? That is not their job. Their job was simply to listen to the community's voice, and these 5 did not. In fact, I've had many people tell me they've been unable to contact some of these councillors over the past weeks and months. Calls not answered, messages and emails not returned, until very recently, until this meeting was called, until the councillors came under increased public and media scrutiny. I've been told in the last few weeks, some community members have miraculously received responses to emails and calls sent weeks ago. So why has it taken a special electors meeting to prompt that? Why can't councillors be open and responsive all the time? That's part of what this motion now seeks, and I'm sure it's something that everyone can agree to. So in conclusion, to put simply, the RAF is what the community wants, the RAF is what the community needs. Delivery of the RAF has been tasked to council. Council, give the RAF the best opportunity to proceed. I urge everyone to listen to what is being proposed and listen carefully to the arguments presented. Ask questions, make statements, but at all times be respectful to all that have taken the time to be present and to exercise their rights to have their voice heard. The commitments in the motion are ones that all councillors should have no trouble signing up to. The motion provides an opportunity for these councillors to win back community confidence and demonstrate their commitment to good governance, good decision-making and good engagement with the community. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could all work together in a more constructive way to deliver something we've all agreed is desperately wanted and needed by the community? Wouldn't it be great to give the electors, the funders and the media some good news to talk about, to make some real progress? We have an opportunity to restart that journey tonight. Let's make the most of it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Watts. Understand that you've got that motion that you'd like to move. Can I get you to read that one more time and then I'll see about a seconder?
Okay, done a lot of reading. The motion reads that the electors of the City of South Perth note, Public confidence in Deputy Mayor D'Souza, Councillor Choi, Councillor Manolis, Councillor Brenda Abrandis and Councillor Navard has been undermined by their following conduct. A. Voting to breach the city's federal $20 million Recreation and Aquatic Facility RAF funding agreement by not appointing a project manager, against the advice of City Administration that this appointment would not involve any additional risk or cost, but failing to do so would create a high risk to the project, jeopardise RAF funding, severely damage the city's reputation, endanger future grants to the city, incur further unnecessary costs such as retendering, and cause delay. B. Voting not to accept a community petition regarding this breach, which had over 2,000 verified signatures and which was determined to be valid by the City Administration. And C. As a result, failing to progress implementation of the city's strategic community plan. However, the community notes the Council's statements of support for the RAF and their acknowledgement of the community's right to democratically petition Council at the Special Council meeting on 1st of November 2022. We therefore seek the Councillor's commitment to the following in order to restore public confidence. D. Be open and accountable to and represent all the community of the district, listening and responding respectfully to the community by answering and returning phone calls and replying to emails in a timely manner, and accepting petitions which are considered valid by the City Administration. E. Base their decisions on relevant, evidence-based matters, including giving appropriate weight to the expert advice of the City's administration and experienced specialist consultants. And F. Support an approach to RAF development which maximises the potential for all three stages to be delivered in a timely manner and which avoids further delay costs.
Thank you, Mr. Watts. So, the motion that is presently on the screen has been moved. I'm going to ask for a seconder now. Does anyone wish to second the motion that's on the screen? I can see a hand up there. Perhaps if that person could come to the microphone and state their... Oh, it's Honey Webb. Hello. Could you state your name and address, please? Thank you very much. Governance, have we got that? Excellent. All right, so the motion has now been moved and seconded. I'm putting the motion to the vote by way of a show of hands. All those in favour, please raise your hands and keep them up until I say put them down. Sorry, could you speak up, please? No debate. I said that earlier. All right. Thank you. Please lower your hands. Those who are against the motion that is currently on the screen, please raise your hands.
Greg, do you need me here?
No, you can. How many for? You count how many for? Or? No, not yet. So you need... Okay, thank you. We've counted those against. Can I ask those who voted for to raise their hands once more? Just going to make sure that we've got the correct numbers. What do you think? I think it's carried, but let's confirm. 97 for, 59 against. Right. So, the vote has been counted. The motion has been carried, 97 votes to 59 votes. Okay. We're now moving on to item 5, which is general business related to the purpose of the meeting, including public statements, public question time, and motions. So, in a moment, I'll invite items of questions, statements, and motions from those who registered prior to the meeting. So, please be reminded that all of the questions, all of the public statements, and all of the motions tonight, they do need to relate to the purpose of the meeting. And when you come to the microphone, please state your name and address before commencing. We'll start with public questions. We've received 13 public questions prior to tonight's meeting, and I'd like to start by inviting Mr. Keely Hodgson, if you'd like to come to the microphone, please. Welcome, Mr. Hodgson.
Do you want the preamble or not, Greg, or just straight to the questions?
If you state your name and your address and then ask your questions, please. Don't worry about the preamble.
No worries. My name is Kylie Hodgson. I live at 77 Talbot Ave in Manning. I've lived there since 1999. I understand that the special meeting has been called due to councillors not accepting the petition that was presented about the RAF. Although the councillors who did not accept the petition were not allowed to explain the reasons why they did not accept the petition due to a procedural issue. Could have the Mayor been the chair of the meeting put to the councillors at the time to vote on allowing the councillors to speak to the decision they made over overruling the procedural issue?
All right. Thank you for your question. It has been long-standing practice at the City for petitions to be placed on the council agenda for council to receive the petition without debate. The vote not accepting the officer's recommendation couldn't have been known until those votes were cast. If a councillor wanted to ask a question about the petition or process, they could have. There was some discussion about an alternative motion, but under the City of South Perth standing orders, alternative motions need to be submitted by noon the day prior to the meeting, and that didn't happen, so that wasn't allowed.
Just the follow-up question on that same one. Being the Mayor and the chair of the meeting, would you have been able to actually put a motion to change that procedure?
No, the standing orders are the standing orders. They're a local law. I don't have the ability to change those on the fly. Would you like to ask your second question?
Question number 2. As the City of South Perth ratepayer, I was not contacted by the group who put the petition out, so I'm unaware of the wording of this petition that has been signed. Can you confirm that the petition explained to the signees all the facts, like the costs of the RAF and the large shortfall in funding that could affect the City of South Perth ratepayers' rates?
Thank you. Mr. Bradford, would you like to address that question?
Yep. Thanks for the question. The City can't comment on the explanations we're giving to the people who signed the petition. We weren't involved in that process. But what I can say is the financial sustainability of the RAF is that with no requirement for operation to be subsidised by city rates revenue has been a fundamental principle of the RAF project since its inception. This is reflected in Part 2 of the November 2020 decision by Council about the RAF and has continued to guide and actually is preeminent in the planning and decision-making by the City and Council on the RAF project.
Thank you, Mr. Bradford. And your third question?
Can you please confirm that the City of South Perth councillors are democratically elected to represent the ratepayers, and during their times as councillors, they will have the vote for and against items based on many factors, and one of these would be financially responsible to all of City of South Perth ratepayers' money?
Thank you for the question. The Local Government Act 1995 sets out the roles and responsibilities of council members. Councillors are expected to provide leadership and guidance to their community, plan for the future, and be accountable for their decision making. Thank you very much for your questions. And I'd
to do the statement later?
Yes, we're doing questions at the moment, but we will be doing statements later.
Thank you.
Pleasure. All right. I'd now like to invite Ms. Maria Large, if you'd like to come to the microphone. Welcome, and we look forward to your questions.
Good evening. My name is Maria Larch, and I live in 310 Victoria Street, South Perth. Through yourself, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to direct a question, if you don't mind, to Councillor Manolis. The question being, on the night of the petition was presented to Council, you and others voted to reject the petition. Why did you do this?
Thank you for your question. Councillor Manolis, did you wish to respond to that?
Yes, I'm happy to respond to that. I'm happy to give my alternative motion. Thank you for the question. It was never my intention to reject the petition. I welcome petitions and believe all petitions should be accepted. I prepared an alternative motion to redact or remove what I considered inaccurate statements, still leaving the meaning of the petition that the appointment of the project manager be reconsidered by Council, allowing the petition to be debated and voted. And furthermore, Standing Order Clause 6.93 requires an officer's report to be included in the agenda, and the petition was not accompanied by an officer's report. As the tenders for the project manager expired on the 30th of June, the petition was unlikely it could be acted upon. In my opinion, the inaccurate statements in the petition were as follows. The petition states, progress to date has been dismal, beset by continued indecision by the elected council. Council has supported the RAF, committing 1.7 million, including an additional 200,000 in this year's budget. Now an extra 185,000 for the new RAF master plan. There's been no indecision, only commitment to procure state and private funding. An additional 40 million specified in the business case has not been received. However, to date, we do not have that additional 40 million. It has not been a lack of trying by the city or the council. Secondly, the June 2022 council meeting decision failed to fairly represent and act in the best interests of the entire community for which they were elected to represent. Sections of the community want the RAF to proceed regardless of cost. My role as a councillor is to represent all sections of the community, but I am aware in the broader community many are very conscious of additional financial burdens. My role is to ensure projects are financially viable and sustainable. Thirdly, the indefensible decision exposes the city to serious reputational risk and placing the already 20 million funding from the external government, from the federal government, in jeopardy. My alternative motion was to redact the word indefensible. According to COSPRA, Electors General Meeting, February 21, the city appears to have received letters in 2020 from Kate Doust, MLC, and the Honourable Minister Mick Murray, Minister for Sport and Recreation, stating it was unlikely that the state government funds would be available for the recreation aquatic facility. In my opinion, the city was working from an adverse position for state funding since 2020 and should have been renegotiating the terms and milestones of the federal grant of 20 million with a new master plan if state funding did not eventuate. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Manolis. Ms Large, I understand you had a second question, but votes, I said no clapping, no booing, no interjections. Please, follow the rules, please. I'm aware that you had a second question, but I think Councillor Manolis has answered that one as well.
Yes, he did basically. The second question through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Manolis was, what was your alternative motion?
Yeah, well, that has been dealt with, so there's no need to send that to Councillor Manolis. Thank you very much for your questions this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'd now like to invite Tula Milonis, I hope I've pronounced that correctly, if you'd like to come to the microphone. Welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
Tula Milonis, 24 Banksia Terrace, South Perth. I've lived in the area for 55 years. My questions were to the Lord Mayor and the City. The office...
Just the regular mayor. There's only one Lord Mayor. That's
That's
Lord
you.
Mayor Zemplis, but I'm just a regular mayor.
Oh, that Mayor. Yes. He is Greek, though. The officers' report dated the 1st of November this year states acceptance of the revised master plan is consistent with the city's strategic community plan. As the revised master plan was accepted unanimously by the council on the 1st of November, the Electors special meeting, which states C, failing to implement the city's strategic community plan has been fulfilled by council and is no longer relevant. Is that correct?
By Electors special meeting, I presume you're referring to the
Yes.
Electors meeting tonight?
The one on the 1st of November.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, just wanted to make sure.
So it's no longer relevant then, is it?
I'll send that one to Mr Bradford.
So the purpose of this meeting is threefold, so there's other reasons for it as well. That's on the notice that I think everyone would have read on the website. Really, it's a matter for the electors to decide and determine what matters in relation to this meeting and any motions that are considered.
Okay. My second question is, why did the council not approach the federal government to renegotiate the terms and milestones of the contract, knowing from 2020 that the state government's position was, and Councillor Manolis outlined that just then, position was that it was unlikely to procure state government funding for the RAF. So we should have had a plan B in place securing the federal funding grant of 20 million. Then it wouldn't have been in any jeopardy.
Thank you. Mr Bradford?
That's not correct. The city has never been informed by the state government that $20 million of funding would not be forthcoming. Those letters from October 2020 are being selectively quoted and quoted out of context. The letters from Kate Doust and Mick Murray were sent by those parties in response to what they state was conjecture in October 2020 that the state had already made a financial commitment to the project. That position was clarified by the city in subsequent letters to the state. Several meetings and other correspondence has taken place between the state and the city, and subsequently the state has encouraged the city to continue developing the project. In fact, the city did not even submit a formal request for state funding until we submitted the Treasury business case until October 2021.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. And your third question?
Why did the city not make the letters that Kate Doust and MLC Mike Murray available to us? I would have lobbied. I would have gone to my politicians and I would have lobbied for this, but was not made aware that they had their opinions of the funding.
As a matter of fact, our state member is in towards the back
yes.
there, but I'll forward your question to Mr Bradford.
Thanks for the question. In fact, the letters, whilst they were addressed to the then CEO in the letter, they were actually emailed to each councillor and the mayor and not sent to the city directly.
Right.
At the time of the letters, again, October 2020, before council had even decided to proceed with the project, the city hadn't completed any of the tasks required, such as developing a business case, submitting the business case, or putting the formal request to the state government. So it really would have been premature to lobby the state government at that point before we'd even submitted a request for funding. We're seeking to have a collaborative working relationship with the state government, and that's the approach that was taken.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr Bradford, and thank you very much for your questions.
Just one other thing, though.
You have to be fair to everyone. There's 3 questions each. There will be a time for public statements later.
So we are getting funding from the state government?
No, I didn't say that.
You're requesting
But I'm going to have to ask that you leave the microphone now. You've had your 3 questions. I've got to be fair to everyone. So, with that, I'd like to invite Mr Roger Atkinson, if you'd like to come to the microphone, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you. My name is Roger Atkinson, 5202 Coode Street, where I've owned and resided for 20 years. Now, the lead petitioner asked about a test of reasonableness, and I have three questions which are on that theme. How can you apply a test of reasonableness to the proposal that are being put forward about trying to resurrect the RAF? First question, there are 127 local government authorities in WA. Was it reasonable to seek an extraordinarily large allocation of 20 million for CISP's swimming pool and ancillaries from the state government? What will the other 126 expect or demand? What is the City of South Perth now presenting as a reasonable demand to the state government? 2 million, 5 million, or even more? Is it reasonable to continue to pursue $20 million from the Australian government, given our new perspective upon matters such as sports rorts and the urgent needs for increases in so many other kinds of federal expenditure? So there is a test of reasonableness far beyond the test of reasonableness that the lead petitioner tried to portray. Now, I'm not seeking answers to these questions.
Mr Atkinson, you've asked a series of questions there. I'm going to let Mr Bradford answer those, and perhaps you can ask one question at a time. That would be greatly appreciated.
Sure.
It's,
more than anything else.
No, it's Mr Bradford's turn to answer now.
Thanks for that question. I'll try to answer it as best I can. The role of local government is to provide for the good government of the persons in the district, and we do that by raising funds in the district, but also working with other levels of government. Both of the other levels of government make substantial contributions to community and other infrastructure, so roads, rail, etc. It's usual accepted practice when one or more levels of government partner on a project that the funding contributions are equitable. In the case of the RAF, the commitment from the federal government and the city was for $20 million each, so it would be normal practice to request the same amount from the state. In terms of the size of the request, there are many other examples where the state has provided funding in support of a community project of a similar amount. In fact, East Fremantle Oval Redevelopment has got a $25 million commitment from the state government. There are many demands on government expenditure, and the decision about whether the proposed RAF receives state funding is ultimately a matter for the state government. However, the RAF will provide much needed community, recreation and sporting infrastructure to support the needs of a growing community in South Perth and the surrounds.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Mr Atkinson, would you like to ask your second question?
Second question, is it reasonable for the state government to say it has contributed very well to South Perth, providing $43.5 million towards the Perth Zoo master plan? Of course, we in the City of South Perth do not own Perth Zoo. It is owned by all of WA, but who cares about its address? The Perth Zoo is far more iconic and unique than a RAF facility that the city may or may not get to build. And then sometime in the future, you may be looking to the state government to fund the South Perth railway station. So it's probably best to not get really offside with the state government by making...
Mr Atkinson, it's the time for public statements is later. What is your question?
The question is whether it's reasonable from the state government's perspective to say that we're doing lots already in South Perth.
Mr Bradford?
I can't answer for the state government priorities overall, but what I can say is that in the discussions we've had with the state government, there is a widely accepted understanding of the need for improved sporting and recreation facilities across the entire Perth metropolitan area of the nature that the RAF is proposing to build, and so that is consistent with what the state government is seeking to deliver.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. And your third question, Mr Atkinson, and please be clear about what the question is. That would be appreciated.
Yes, again on this reasonableness theme, I refer to serious and well-known inflationary and capacity constraints in the building and construction industry, when I think we all agree there should be a greater concentration on residential, especially the affordable housing sector. So is it reasonable to feel that local government swimming pools and ancillaries should go to the back end of the long queue of demands upon building and construction industry? Could the City of South Perth do its bit for our new age of austerity and really downsize the RAF to a simple small pool attached to the existing George Burnett Leisure Centre, allocating its own $20 million to the project, leaving the WA and Australian governments to get on with all those more important essentials that are more deserving than another swimming pool?
Thank you. Mr Bradford?
Thank you for the question. A standalone swimming pool at George Burnett Leisure Centre would attract ongoing operational costs that would be borne by the ratepayer. Council endorsed the Collier Park Golf Course as the preferred location for the RAF in September 29 after an extensive process considering many sites. A financially sustainable recreation and aquatic facility could not be delivered at George Burnett Leisure Centre due to the lack of integration with other activities.
Thank you, Mr Bradford, and thank you, Mr Atkinson, for your questions.
Thank you.
I'd now like to invite Messina Nicholas, if you'd like to come to the microphone. Welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
My name is Messina Nicholas. I live at 6 Todd Avenue, Como, and have lived in the area for the last 52 years.
Thank you very much. Please take a seat and perhaps move the microphone just a little bit closer to you.
Okay. Both of my questions have been asked and answered, so it's a little bit irrelevant I'm here, but I've thought of another one.
I'll allow it.
Mayor, would you be able, Mr Manolis answered both of my questions, but I'm really interested into the other 4 councillors that voted against the motion, why they voted against. I heard why Mr Manolis did. I'd like to really know, starting from the Deputy Lord Mayor.
And when you say the motion, you mean the motion to accept the community petition?
Yes.
All right.
To not accept the...
Do not accept.
Yeah.
And that's to the, not to Councillor Manolis, he's already answered it, but to the 4 councillors who voted not to accept.
Not to accept.
All right, thank you. Just wanted to clarify that. Councillors, does anyone wish to respond to that question? Councillor D'Souza. You have 3 minutes, by the way.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for the question. I made my comments at last week's meeting clear in that I erred in not accepting the petition, and I would simply refer you to those. I laid down my reasons in quite extensive detail, and I would just encourage you to go through the audio and listen to basically me explaining that I initially believed there would have been legal implications around the petition. However, in the procedural confusion, I wasn't able to put that question to the CEO. Knowing, I guess, now what I knew earlier, knew later, and with the CEO's advice, I would have made a different decision, and that's something that I've put on the public record.
Thank you, Councillor D'Souza. Councillor Choi.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you very much for the question. I refer to the September Ordinary Council meeting, where, in my view, due process on which the premise the Council voted on was not followed. Sorry, just cut out there for a sec. I also refer to the minutes and audio of the Council meeting of 1st November 2022, wherein I addressed the matters raised by this question. With the Mayor's indulgence, I can read that part of my speech out again now.
You have 3 minutes. As long as you don't go over that, that's fine.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In my opinion, voting on acceptance of the petition was not permitted in accordance with Clause 6.93 of the Standing Order Local Law 2007, as no report had been presented on the item and Council had not had the opportunity to consider the issues raised in the petition. There has been lots of talk about the upholding of democracy recently, following the standing orders and local laws procedures as part of that democratic process. 2. The request to appoint the project manager was also not an achievable action, and this has been confirmed on page 7 of the officer's report. 3. Some of the information included in the body of the petition was, in my view, incorrect. And 4. Strong language that added no substance to the request was, in my view, unnecessary and detracted from the actual request itself. In terms of setting precedents, this is irrelevant in my view. There is no precedence with the presenting of petitions, as it's covered under the Standing Orders local law, and in that regard, right is right and wrong is wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Choi. Councillor Navard or Councillor Brenda Abrandis, would either of you like to speak? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much for the question. Firstly, with regard to the petition, the wording was inappropriate in many aspects. So the first aspect was with regard to it being dismal and beset with continued indecision. As elected council members, we have been making decisions throughout the entire process on the aquatic facility. At no point in time have council not made a decision. The aspect of it being dismal, unfortunately, does not reflect the amount of effort and work that the council and the administration have undertaken behind the scenes and not actually in ordinary council meetings. Some of the wording failing to represent and act in the best interests of the entire community for which they were elected to represent is not appropriate. Council members have always been acting and making decisions in the best interest and taking that on board. We make sure that we fulfil not only the due diligence required in the governance of these processes, but we also take into account the financial considerations. So effectively, with regard to admitting to actually not act in the best interest of the entire community would be inappropriate as an elected member. You've also heard tonight that section 3.9 clause 3 did present an issue for council, and at the meeting that petition was actually presented as a motion item. We were unable to actually speak to the item. We were aware that Councillor Manolis was actually preparing an alternate motion, which we weren't given consideration to actually take into account. With regard to this decision being indefeasible and also reputationally causing damage for the city with regard to other local governments and other levels of government, I also find this to be inappropriate. Throughout the whole process, decisions are made with regard to funding, and funding through state or federal levels will always come back to local governments when there is a project that's in need. So for the language that was used in the actual petition and the process that
30
was
seconds, Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The wording was not actually appropriate for accepting on the night. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Councillor Navard, did you wish to speak? You've got 3 minutes.
Thanks. I personally was particularly concerned that the petition did not have any clause where the city could actually say to the petitioners, yes, we'll look at that. As well, I considered Mr. Watt's assumption that the councillors were indecisive. I didn't regard that as a criticism. I had actually been concerned that he had the premise for his concerns wrongly diagnosed. And yes, that had actually caused him to misunderstand what the underlying issue was. There was no deliberation or report that was supplied by the city officers, so there was no advice regarding how the city might handle the request part of the petition. Councillor Manolis had indicated he had an alternative motion, and the city officer advised councillors that they could vote no and then move to consider Councillor Manolis's alternative motion. As I understand it, the Mayor chose not to elect Councillor Manolis's alternative motion, and that was his prerogative. I emailed Mr. Watts the following evening because I was concerned, and in response to his own email, and explained that I believed the cause for the delay was about funding, and rather than indecision. So that was what I was talking about. And there was nothing actionable in the petition because the contract had already lapsed. To the media on the 18th of October, Mr. Watts indicated that I had disagreed with his petition. That actually was not correct. And so on the 1st of November, the other aspect where the project officer had made some comment about the petition had indicated that the tender couldn't be considered again now. So
30 seconds, Councillor Navard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you finished?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And thank you very much for your question.
One more. That was only one. Why did we vote before we heard the councillors, what they had to say? Because I may have changed my vote.
Folks, I did say no clapping, no booing, no interjections. Please respect the rules. Simply because there are no standing orders or rules governing the conduct of this meeting, and that means that I need to sort of set the agenda, and that's what I've chosen. It is at my discretion, but thank you for the question. All right, I would now like to invite Amanda Coldham to the microphone, please. Welcome, and we look forward to your questions.
I'm Amanda Coldham from Jubilee Street in South Perth. I support the 5 councillors who, in my view, responsibly asked for clarification on the funding of this RAF project and made appropriate decisions accordingly. I had concerns how the project would affect escalating rate rises for ratepayers in the future. So my question 1 is, which I think you've mostly answered my questions, if this project proceeds not fully funded, what is the projected rate rise anticipated per household per annum?
Thank you for your question. Mr. Bradford?
Yep, thanks for the question. We are still in the planning phases of the project. There are several decisions that Council will need to make before the City puts to Council a project scope and budget which will include the funding. And we can't put forward a project that isn't funded. And to be clear, one of the key principles of the RAF project is that there is no requirement for the operations of the RAF to be subsidised by the City rates revenue. That is unchanged. So there will be no impact on rates as a consequence of the RAF.
Thank you. My question 2 is, considering our councillors were democratically elected by ratepayers in their respective ward with a majority of votes, and in my view, they have stood by their electoral commitments, shouldn't it be ratepayers of those wards that have the right to vote on a vote of no confidence?
Thank you. Mr. Bradford?
Thanks for the question. I mean, under the Act, all electors are entitled to a vote in special electors meetings.
Sorry, could you repeat
All
that?
electors are entitled to vote.
What about people who are not electors, who are not in the suburb?
Is this your third question? I do have to. Do you want to ask that question as your third question, or did you want to ask your actual third question? I've just got to be fair to everyone.
Okay, I was just asking that with the second. My third question, can you read it out? Because I've left my third question over there.
Right, you want me to read your third question?
My third question, yes.
Okay, so the third question from Ms. Coldham is, in regard to the vote of no confidence, is it only verified electors of the City of South Perth wards, bearing in mind there wasn't actually a vote of no confidence, that's my editing, that are able to vote? Given in electing councillors, you must be a ratepayer of the ward, and therefore not appropriate to have non-ratepayers present at the electors meeting for a vote of no confidence in our elected councillors. We didn't have a vote of no confidence at the end, but Mr. Bradford, did you wish to respond?
So special elected meetings are open to the public. However, only electors of South Perth are able to vote on motions that are put at those meetings, and that's why we ask people to state their name and address to give some evidence that they are electors.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Thank you very much for your questions. I'd now like to invite Mario Terry, if you'd like to come to the microphone, and we look forward to your questions.
My name is Mario Terry. I live in Jubilee Street, South Perth. I've lived in South Perth for more than 30 years. My first question is, how does the council expect to raise the necessary funds to pay for the RAF without state funding? Would the sale of council land be considered?
Thank you. Mr. Bradford?
Under the current arrangement, funding from the state government isn't required to build stage 1 of the RAF. Future stages of the RAF are subject to external funding and future decisions of council. The council has not yet determined how it will fund its $20 million contribution to stage 1 of the RAF. The $20 million commitment from the city is actually less than what is expected to be spent on the upgrades to the golf course and George Burnett Leisure Centre in the event that the RAF does not proceed.
Thank you. Second question?
Do you expect the RAF to make a profit or lose money?
Thank you. Mr. Bradford?
Thank you for the question. All of the operational and financial models that we've conducted for the RAF demonstrate a financial return to the city, that is, a surplus generated for the city. So in accordance with the decision of council last week, the city is going to update those operational and financial models to reflect the staged approach, and they'll be presented back to council for consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Bradford. Any further questions, or was...
My other question's already been answered.
Very good. Thank you very much. All right. I'd now like to invite Ms. Cecilia Brooke, if you'd like to come to the microphone. And we look forward to your questions. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors. Currently, the city has spent around $1.7 million plus 200,000 plus another 150,000. That's close to $2 million. What budget is that coming out of, please?
Thank you. Mr. Bradford?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, the city has currently spent about 1.7 million plus 200,000, and 185,000 is agreed to at last month's meeting, at the special meeting. What budget is that money coming from, please?
So the expenditure to date comes from municipal funds. The future decisions about the RAF expenditure will be a matter for council. They'll be put to council for decisions. One thing I would note, yes, the expenditure to date is substantial by City of South Perth standards, but it should be noted that the government guide for projects of this nature, which is actually published on the DLGSC website, suggests that up to 10% of the total capital budget would be expended in the planning phases. We are well under this benchmark.
Because of the due financial diligence exhibited by the 5 councillors when making the controversial but tough decisions about the RAF project, and the business case now needs to be redefined, how can you be absolutely certain that there will be no ratepayers' costs out of this, with the climate that we are in now with the building industry?
Thank you. Mr. Bradford?
So the City is working towards the provision of a recreation and aquatic facility at Collier Park Golf Course, consistent with the strategic community plan and the previous decisions of Council. We do know that a standalone aquatic facility, separate to that, would require ongoing subsidy by the ratepayers of South Perth. The City is not progressing an option to develop a standalone facility, and it's because it hasn't been directed to do so by Council, and it wouldn't be in the financial interest of the City to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brooke. Okay, I'd now like to invite Mr. Bernard Roberts, if you'd like to come to the microphone. Welcome, and we look forward to your questions. And I see you do have a lengthy preamble there. Perhaps if you can get to the questions as quickly as you can.
Thank you. Bernard Roberts, 5A Garden Street, South Perth. Lived in South Perth for over 30 years. The questions relate particularly to the council standing orders with regard to petitions, section 6.9 and in particular section 3, which states that any meeting the council is not, I repeat, is not to vote on any matter that is subject of a petition presented to that meeting unless the matter is the subject of a report included in the agenda and the council has considered the issue raised in the petition. So the first question, can the City please advise why these standing orders were not complied with at the ordinary council meeting of the 27th of September 2022?
Thank you for your question. Mr Bradford?
Thanks for the question. In fact, the standing orders were complied with. There are 2 references to how petitions are dealt with in the standing orders. So at the ordinary council meeting of the 27th of September, the petition was presented correctly in accordance with clause 5.2.1, part 8.1, petitions. This has been the City's long-standing practice with regard to petitions. Then, in accordance with Standing Order 6.92, the officer's recommendation was simply that the petition received from George Watts of Yallambee Place, Karrawara, together with 2016 verified signatures and 58 unverified signatures, in relation to the recreation and aquatic facility, be forwarded to the relevant director for consideration. So Council was not asked to vote on any matter that was the subject of the petition at that meeting. A report dealing with the subject matter was dealt with at the subsequent meeting. So in all cases, the standing orders were complied with.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. And your second question?
I'll actually go to my third question, if that's okay.
By all means.
Obviously, what we've heard from the councillors tonight in their response to previous questions, there is some confusion about how the standing orders are applied to particular petition submissions. Will the City be looking at reviewing their processes to ensure that all involved in petition submissions, both on council and all those submitting, are aware of the correct processes for achieving that?
Thank you for the question. Mr Bradford?
Yeah, the City will review the processes. However, I'll reiterate, the petition was dealt with in accordance with the standing orders and everything was complied with.
Okay, but the question was, will people be made to better understand the existing...
I think everybody has a better understanding of the process now, and I'll also add that standard meeting procedures are part of the local government reform that the Minister has announced, and they will be coming in the near future. And so that will deal with that as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions. I'd now like to invite Mr John Miles to the microphone. Welcome, Mr Miles. We look forward to your questions.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is John Miles. I live at 6 Doneraile Court in Waterford, and I have lived there for around about 30 odd years. Through you, Mr Mayor, I would like to direct my questions to Councillor Navard. And first of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Navard for being one of the 3 councillors that have replied to all my emails. I'll make that point. Councillor Navard, you sent me an email saying you did not oppose the concept of a recreation and aquatic facility. The decisions you have been making in Council, I believe, had hindered negotiations for additional funding. My question to you is, do you support RAF?
Mr Navard, maybe pull the, Councillor Navard, maybe pull the microphone a bit closer. It's hard for people to hear you. And obviously you do want to respond, but I was going to ask you if you did like to respond, but I take it you do, so
Yes,
you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor Muller. Thank you, Mr Miles, for the question. And yes, I do. And I am extremely relieved that we're starting to think about the process differently. That was my greatest concern. And I think that the resolution that has come forward in the last week is, to me, a great relief.
Thank you for that. In the same email you sent me, you referred to your obligation to apply due diligence in relation to the City in financial matters. If you do not oppose, and in fact you do support RAF, and all the good things that he's going to bring to the community, then what are you going to do to satisfy the due diligence and financial substantiability in addition to what the CEO and City officers have already provided you with?
Thank you for the second question. Councillor Navard, do you wish to respond to that?
Yes, due diligence, and says I read everything and look at it very carefully. That's it, read the lot.
And the last question is, when I contacted you about the rejection of the largest verified petition handed to the City of South Perth, you replied that it has been a most unfortunate and uncomfortable set of circumstances. Also, that you think the Mayor and the City will sort out the confusion based on legal advice they have received. Please can you explain why it was a most unfortunate and uncomfortable set of circumstances?
Councillor Navard, would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, I'm not quite clear about that. Could you just explain that a little bit again?
Well, in your email you said that that the petition, what had happened with the petition was most unfortunate and an uncomfortable set of circumstances. And you also said that you think that the Mayor and the City will sort out the confusion based on advice they received. Please, can you explain why it was most unfortunate and uncomfortable set of circumstances?
Oh, the fact that on the night, it wasn't resolved, and I was most concerned about how the evening had ended up. And so I was hoping that that might all get sorted. But as you can see, it became a bit more exciting.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for your questions, Mr Miles. I'd now like to invite Ms Lindley Miles, if you'd like to come to the microphone. Welcome, and we look forward to your questions.
Hello, my name is Lindley Miles. I live at 6 Doneraile Court in Waterford, and I've lived there for over 30 years. So through you, Mayor Milner, I would like to direct some questions to Councillor Choi, if I may.
If you'd like to ask the first question, and then we'll see if Councillor Choi would like to respond.
Okay. Councillor Choi, at last week's special meeting on the 1st of November, you said, and I quote, "Voting on acceptance of the petitions was not permitted in accordance with 6.93 of the Standing Orders Local Law 2007, as no report has been presented on the item and Council had not had an opportunity to consider the issues raised in the petition. Since you have been a member of Council, 7 petitions have been received by the City of South Perth. 6 of them have been accepted by the Council in the way that has been common practice for the Council over the years. None of these petitions had any report that had been presented on the item, and Council had not had the opportunity to consider issues raised in the petition. I would ask you, Councillor Choi, why did you accept these 6 petitions and not the RAF petition?
Thank you for the question. Councillor Choi, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Ms Miles, for the question. I've already addressed this question in the answer I gave previously. I refer to the minutes and audio of the Council meeting of 1st November 2022, where I addressed the matters raised by your question.
My question number 2. Councillor Choi, when you voted against appointing a project manager in June 2022, did you investigate the need to re-tender and how it would generate costs to the ratepayers and the reputational damage to the tenderers?
Thank you for the question. Councillor Choi, do you wish to respond to that?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I wasn't given prior notice of this question, so I'll take it on notice.
All right. Ms Miles, do you have a third question?
I have a third question. Councillor Choi, at last week's special council meeting on the 1st of November, you stated you had solid financial concerns for the RAF. Also, you stated you had concerns about the city's running deficit. How can you refer to a debt and financial concerns when you have not completed discussions with potential funding partners or undertaken this schematic and detailed design for the RAF?
Councillor Choi, would you like to respond to that question?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you again, Ms Miles, for the question. Again, I wasn't given prior notice of this question, so I'll take that on notice.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Choi, and thank you, Ms Miles, for your questions. I'd now like to invite Mary Claire Andrews to the microphone. Welcome, Ms Andrews, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mary Claire Andrews. I live at Unit 3174 Melville Parade and have lived in the City of South Perth since the early 1980s. 2 of my questions have been answered, so I, through you, would like to ask Deputy Mayor De Souza one question. And the question is, Deputy Mayor De Souza, you said last week when explaining your vote, and I quote, on the petition that is, so basically I was concerned the contents of the petition might have been defamatory or had legal implications for council. I was led to believe this, but I was incorrect. In the procedural confusion, I was not able to put this question to the city. I didn't have the opportunity to clarify the question. Without that opportunity, I made the decision that I did based on the information at hand. My questions to you, Deputy Mayor, are: how were you led to believe that the petition might have been defamatory or had legal implications for council?
Thank you for the question. Councillor De Souza, do you wish to respond to that?
I do. Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Ms Andrews, for your question. I've given my explanation at last week's special council meeting, and I reiterated that explanation earlier today, and I just refer you to those explanations.
Thank you, Councillor De Souza. Do you have a second question there, Ms Andrews?
Yes. Subsequent to that, what information that you had at hand was presented to you to lead you to this belief that it could have been defamatory or illegal, and by whom was it presented?
Thank you again for your question, Ms Andrews. As I've said, I've answered this question earlier, and I would refer you to my statement in the special council meeting last week for the answers to your questions.
Thank you. Did you have a third question there?
Just a final one, thank you. If, as you said, you were concerned about the ability of council to accept the petition, did you refer to the standing orders governing petitions, and if not, why?
Thank you.
Did you wish to respond?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So, thank you again, Ms Andrews, for your question. I really don't understand what more I can do. I've given my explanation. I've given a very comprehensive explanation. I've said that I've made a mistake, and if the case is going to be that no amount of explanation is good enough, then I really don't understand, I guess, the line of questioning which seeks to potentially cast doubt on council decisions. I have been extremely forthright and respectful in the way I've made those explanations, and I would simply refer you to those previous comments I've made.
Thank you, Councillor De Souza, and thank you, Ms Andrews, for your questions.
Thank you.
I'd now like to invite Ms Sue Doherty, if you'd like to come to the microphone. Welcome, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. My name is Sue Doherty and I live at 11 Birdwood Avenue in Como. Through you, Mr Mayor, my questions are to Councillor Brandis. Councillor Brandis, you've repeatedly ignored advice from the city officers and experts over a period on 7 occasions, and therefore exposing the council, city and community to high risk and not supporting the recreation and aquatic facility when the design and costings haven't been made, and your focus has been on the macroeconomic situation. Why has this happened?
Councillor Brenda Brandis, did you wish to respond?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Ms Doherty, for the question. As I clearly articulated at the special council meeting and at previous meetings as well, the finances are a primary concern with regard to this undertaking. This will be the single largest investment the city is likely to make. The plan for this undertaking was an $80 million project. Recent cost escalations, which I articulated, indicate that this could be anywhere in the vicinity of up to $100 million. inflation over the last 2 years have been at the highest in 32 years. Over the last 4 years, the city has had net operating results of losses between $0.4 of a million to $0.9 of a million. The city currently has about $16 million in external debt on the balance sheet. It also has an unfunded portion of the Collier Park Village leaseholders' liability of around about $17 million. The city is not without debt. The city is not without dealing with increasing cost escalations for operational costs, and the city is also trying to manage the impact that this might have on ratepayers. For these reasons, the cost of the recreational aquatic facility needs to be reviewed, because $20 million funding from the federal government and a city in principle contribution at this point in time, which was approved by all council members, of $20 million, which is to be repaid, did not equal $80 million or a higher amount such as $100 million, taking into account cost escalations without changing the scope. Thank you.
Thank you. My second question. At last week's special council meeting, Councillor Branders, you referred to the importance of transparency at the early stages of the RAF project. Also, you indicated that the state government funding was not available for the RAF for at least 2 years. At least you knew that 2 years ago. The Premier of our state is in a position to make big decisions, particularly financing community infrastructure. I understand your employment is Chief Financial Officer with Infrastructure WA and the Department of Premier and Cabinet, which includes the Department of Treasury. At the September 2022 council meeting, a decision was made by council to write to the WA Department of Treasury seeking an evaluation and review of the costings of the RAF capital and other items based on the Treasury business case submitted in 2021. Given your current employment, would not the public in South Perth consider your current position a conflict of interest?
Councillor Brenda Brandis, did you wish to respond to that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would. Thank you again, Ms. Doherty, for the question. No, my positions are correctly the CFO for the Department of the Premier and Cabinet and also the CFO for Infrastructure WA. I have no conflict at all with regard to those positions. I am not part of decision-making within those organisations, and that includes with regard to approving budget items or even presenting budget items. I am the CFO of those departments. With regard to the earlier statement, I think you might have mentioned that I'm also part of the Department of Treasury, which is not correct. It's only those two departments. So my involvement in any decision-making process is actually zero, and I'm not party to budget submissions. I merely oversee what is the operational budget for the department and not for infrastructure projects for the state. Thank you, Ms. Doherty.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your questions. I'd now like to invite Ms. Jo Newman, if you'd like to come to the microphone. Welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you. I'm Jo Newman. I live at 1B Craigie Crescent in Manning. I've been there since 2010 and I've lived in the city since I've been about 7. Good evening, Mr Mayor, good evening, councillors, and good evening to members of the admin team. Thanks for organising this meeting. I've got 3 questions tonight on the petition and also the standing orders. Some of them have been touched on, but I think some of the questions I have, if it's okay, just require further clarification. So my first question, in reference to clause 6.9.2 of the Standing Orders, Local Law 2007, where it states, and I quote, "Upon receiving a petition, the city is to submit the petition to the relevant employee to be included in his or her deliberations and report on the matter that is the subject of the petition." Where in that statement, or indeed anywhere in the standing orders, does it say rejecting a petition is permitted?
Mr. Bradford, should I send that to you or to Mr. Adams? Mr. Adams.
Might be better. Yeah, it's not mentioned in the standing orders about rejecting petitions.
Folks at the back, were you able to hear that? Perhaps if you could repeat that, please, Mr. Adams.
It's not mentioned in the standing orders about rejecting petitions.
Thank you.
And your second question?
Second question, I've rewritten on the night because some of them have been addressed earlier, as I said. Just seeking some further clarification. There's been a lot of discussion tonight about the language of the petition, the wording of the petition. Councillor Manolis, I know you said that it contained inaccurate statements, and other councillors have used similar language as well in terms of the content. You particularly wanted to prepare an alternate motion, Councillor Manolis. My question, I think, is pretty simple, and it applies to all 5 councillors, if appropriate, Mr. Mayor, the 5 councillors that voted no. How did you know the wording was not appropriate if it was presented for the first time that night, particularly as we have heard earlier this evening that there was no report provided prior and therefore no opportunity for council to have a look and have a discussion when it was raised?
I was one of the 4 councillors that voted to accept the petition, but even prior to the petition making its way to council, I was certainly aware that the petition was doing the rounds, and I imagine that other councillors were as well. Do any other councillors wish to address that point? Councillor Choi?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Newman, for the question. I believe that it was included in the agenda papers on the Friday afternoon when it was released to the public. That's when I saw it.
Councillor Manolis?
I also saw it on the agenda papers on Friday when it was released. That wasn't the first time we saw it at the meeting, no.
All right. I might give Mr. Bradford an opportunity to talk about the process of...
Hi, Mr. Newman. Thanks for your question. I know we've had a exchange of emails over the same topic, but just to clarify the standing orders, petitions are dealt with in 2 parts under the standing orders. It's really a 2-step process. One is to present the petition under the agenda. I haven't got the standing orders in front of me, or I can't quote the number, and that is the process that really just says it has been received, it gets referred to a city's officer, and then a report comes. So a 2-step process. And that has now been followed, but the vote that you're referring to was actually, it was at the first step. So there is that 2-step process. There is we do not provide a report in that first part, in that first step. The report comes in the subsequent step.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. My final question is quick. If the community were to lobby for a 50-metre outdoor pool, will that petition be accepted?
I can't speak for the entire council, but I would certainly vote. Well, I don't think they're going to council for votes anymore, but just speaking in my personal capacity, if there's a community petition, I'll have regard to it. Did anyone else want to say anything different? I think that Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the question. The proposal for a 50-metre outdoor pool would be the subject of a feasibility study and also the economics. We've got the one concept before us right now, which is stage 1, so any additional stages would need separate assessment of the finances. I appreciate a lot of people wanted the 50-metre outdoor pool more than anything, but it did come down to an aspect of economics with regard to potential operators seeing this as feasible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Abrandis. And thank you, Ms Newman, for your questions.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, I'd now like to invite Mr Zane Richter to the microphone. Welcome, Mr Richter. And we look forward to your questions.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. Thanks for the time tonight. I had to rewrite one of the questions because one of them got answered, but here I go. This question I'd like to direct to the 5 councillors that voted no. You've repeatedly said that you will only commit to the City of Perth to a financially viable RAF. I'm interested to know what evidence you would require to be satisfied that the RAF project is financially viable?
Okay, so that question is being asked to Councillor Navard, Councillor Choi, Councillor Manolis, Councillor Brenda Brandis and Councillor D'Souza. Does anyone wish to respond? You'll have 3 minutes if you do. Councillor Navard?
Well, to my way of thinking, the all in one go was quite a risky proposition when we had clearly a lot less than half the money that would probably be required. So to me, looking at this project as a staged model seems to me to be certainly reducing the risk substantially. So that would be my answer.
Thank you, Councillor Navard. Councillors, is anyone else? Thank you, Councillor Brenda Brandis. And the question was, what evidence would you require to be satisfied that the RAF project is financially viable? Councillor Brenda Brandis, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Mr Richter, for the question. It is a good question. It does actually require a proper business case. It does actually require remodelling of the numbers. We are in a completely different set of circumstances to where we were a couple of years ago. Costs have escalated. Various materials have moved between 5 and 20%. So we're not looking at the same sort of economics. Everything needs to be reconsidered, and that's where we are right now. We're not in a situation where we're actually ready to actually embark on stage one. It still requires a final investment decision, and it still requires the additional capital funding. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done, and Council will need to go through the process to actually satisfy ourselves financially that we're acting in the best interest of all the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Brandis. Is there any other councillors that would like to respond to that question? Councillor Manolis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for the question. To me, we hadn't raised, or the funds that we'd raised hadn't been sufficient. We only had 40 million of the 80 million, so for it to be viable, we had to be able to have the funds to actually build it, and we were nowhere near that. The state had not agreed to give us any grant, and if there would have been a new business case, costs have escalated, and we would have needed additional funding, and without that funding, there's no project. To me, there's no project. If you haven't got the funding, there's no project, and you need to reevaluate what you can build with the funding that you have.
Thank you, Councillor Manolis. Councillor Choi?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Mr Richter, for the question. Similarly, I would need to see comprehensive funding, or at least a commitment of comprehensive funding in place or forthcoming, including from the state government. If the state government had given us at least some indication as to a funding commitment of any kind, don't think we'd be sitting here this evening. I think we would have been able to progress sooner, but we've been waiting for that commitment. And I think the way forward, as the council unanimously voted to endorse at the last council meeting, special council meeting, and again I'm grateful to the CEO and administration for bringing that forward, is a revised scope and a revised model. And I think that is much more financially responsible at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Choi. Councillor D'Souza?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Mr Richter, for your question. In response, I would simply say the special council meeting last week that proposed a way forward. So my understanding is the city will do a refresh of the operating models and the financial business case, and we will be presented back with that early next year, March, as I understand it. So hopefully from that we'll get some more information as to what the rescoped RAF looks like. But my two red lines have always been, is the project fully funded and will it increase rates? And if the answer to those two are yes, it's fully funded, and no, it doesn't increase rates, and I'm satisfied with what the city provides back in March, then I see no objection. But like I said, it's all hypothetical until we get that work back from the city.
Thank you, Councillor D'Souza. Mr Richter, did you have any other questions that you wish to ask?
Two more, Mr Mayor. I apologise, I forgot to mention my address, 125 Manning Road in Manning. Is where I really
Thank you.
So this does lead on to the next question, and I guess there's a lot of discussion around increase in rates associated with the RAF. I ask the same 5 councillors the next question through the the Mayor. A world-class RAF will be a major lifestyle drawcard, attracting greater investment, improving resident interest to live in South Perth. Do councillors acknowledge the financial benefits and amenity the community will have in their own private assets, the value in their homes, and the additional community provisions brought about from increased investment and capital spending in the City of South Perth? Because it will be a more attractive, inclusive and comprehensively catered for local government area. Simply, a RAF increases the value of our homes, not just potentially risking a small rate rise. Have you considered the value that comes with a RAF in amenity, livability, inclusivity in your financial considerations?
Thank you. And is that addressed to the same 5 councillors?
Yes, it is.
All right. Councillor D'Souza?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I went last first, so I'll kick off now. Thank you again for your question. I have never been against a RAF. I think that's a misconception going around out there. That's why in 2018 I voted to start the process. Like I've said before, we have to wait till we get back the work being commissioned by the city. That's why at the special council meeting last week we approved 185k more to do that work, and until we have that information in front of us, I really can't comment anymore. In broad terms, yes, I do agree the RAF brings numerous social and economic benefits, but it has to be weighed up against the impact that ratepayers have to bear. So waiting for that work to come back, and then I will make my decision.
Thank you, Councillor D'Souza. Councillor Brenda Brandis, did you wish to respond?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you again, Mr Richter, for the question. I concur with Councillor D'Souza. Council have actually supported the RAF. We have moved this forward. We've actually initially agreed to the initial project. We've also supported the in-principle injection of $20 million, which is city money, ratepayers' money, into the arrangement to actually start the funding process. So it's not that council are against the RAF, it's the economics. With regard to me making a decision as to what value that this might actually attribute to my house, that's not valid decision making in this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Brandis. Councillor Manolis, did you wish to say anything? You don't have to, but you can if you want to.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for the question. I want to say that I've been a personal supporter of the RAF for many years and do truly believe that the City of South Perth requires an aquatic facility. Like me, many residents have family living in the city, and like them, I would like an aquatic facility for myself, my children and my grandchildren to use. The RAF should be financially sustainable and viable. And without the state government grant, I don't believe the RAF is financially sustainable. And I must say that the one thing I would not take into consideration is whether it increases the value of my home.
Thank you, Councillor Manolis. Councillor Choi, did you wish to say anything?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor, and thanks again, Mr Richter, for the question. It's a good question. Let's find my notes here. First of all, I agree that amenities that improve the well-being of the residents are important. Remember, we are residents with families too. We're also electors and ratepayers sitting around this room. We have the same vision. We have the same wants and needs. I reaffirm my support for the provision of increased recreational facilities in our district. I always have. Look at my voting track record on playgrounds and other, recreational facilities that have come before council. But I agree with my fellow colleagues, it can't be at any cost, including especially for a facility which is the largest single project in the city's history. And if indulgence of the Mayor, if I can repeat some of my speech from the Electors special council meeting of last week.
You can, just be aware that you can't go over 3 minutes in total for your response.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So contrary to what I'm hearing some residents say, which appears to be the higher value of a minority of our constituency, This is definitely a financial matter and decision, not just a social one. Anything less, in my view, is not responsible good governance. However, I'm open to being convinced otherwise, and so despite what I believe to be the prevailing view of our constituents in expressing a strong preference for any aquatic facility not to impact on their rates, I invite anyone on this council or from the community who does not mind their rates increasing in order to facilitate an early commencement or broader scope for this facility to inform me and perhaps this council accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Choi. Councillor Navard, would you like to respond?
Not really, but I would be very happy to do it if you shoot me the question through. Thank you.
By all means. Thank you. Mr. Richter, one more question.
Last one. Many South Perth residents are currently going to other local government areas to access a range of recreation and aquatic facilities not catered for in South Perth. This is resulting in large retail leakage through incidental spending outside the city of South Perth at these distant locations. Without a RAF, local businesses will not only have reduced revenue from local community, but also lose out in attracting people from outside their local government's boundaries. Does the council consider how the decision for no RAF is failing to support local businesses?
So is that to the councillors, or would you like a more generic response from the city administration? Because that's quite a detailed question.
I'll let you appoint the question, Mayor.
I might send that one to Mr. Bradford then.
Thanks for the question. I'll attempt to answer it. The visitation for the RAF is a key metric that is used to do the financial modelling. And that has been done looking at who are all the likely people to come to the RAF for the various reasons that it offers. And so that is taken into account. The indirect benefits associated with extra visitation, though, in terms of increased expenditure outside of the RAF, haven't been explicitly considered in the modelling for the RAF. I'd also mention that where the city does have an economic development plan that does have actions and measures associated with attracting additional people to the city for various reasons, and that does acknowledge that that does bring additional benefits to the city.
Thank you, Mr. Bradford, and thank you, Mr. Richter, for your questions.
Thanks for your time.
Now, I am conscious that there may have been some public questions that were registered in the foyer prior to the commencement of the meeting. We will get to them, but I might turn now, in the interest of time, for the 8 public statements that were registered prior to tonight's meeting. So with that, I'd like to invite Mr. Les Osterley, if you'd like to come to the microphone. And we look forward to your statement, bearing in mind that you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, everybody. Les Osterley, Unit 224, Barker Avenue, Como. I felt really good after last week's meeting. Council united and agreed on a way forward, a very sensible staged approach. In my naivety, I thought, well, we don't even need next week's meeting. Boy, was I wrong. So I'll speak to the motion put forward by Mr. Watts. The 3 main elements, I'll take the easy ones first. It says that there should have no confidence expressed in the 5 for voting to breach the city's funding agreement with the Commonwealth. Wrong. They didn't vote that way. That's factually incorrect. There's no evidence to support that. The other part, failing to implement the city's strategic community plan. Wrong. There's no evidence to say that they voted for that either. So let's talk about not accepting the petition. I agree. They made a mistake. We've heard most of them say, yes, I made a mistake. So whilst I think they made a mistake, I understand their reasons. And some of those reasons are that in the 3.5 years since the 20 mil from the federal government was received or promised, unfortunately the city's been unsuccessful in attracting any money. In fact, it's pledged 20, which is unfunded, and is looking for another 40, still unfunded. So we're 60 short. We heard last week from speakers who stated that council's decision should be based on evidence. This is true. There's no greater piece of evidence than the fact that in 3.5 years since it's received notification of the 20 mil from the Commonwealth, City has not been able to attract the additional funding required for RAF Mark 1. That's why I was so pleased to see RAF Mark 2, because that looks like it might be a goer. So, why are we here? I'm not really sure. It appears we're here to sanction 5 councillors for trying to do the right thing. I have no doubt that they acted in good faith, with only the interest of the city's ratepayers at heart. I don't think they should be sanctioned or criticised for that. I think they should be recognised for their strength of character and courage in standing up for what they believe is right, particularly in the face of severe and sometimes very distasteful and inappropriate criticism from both within the council and on social media, if you read it. Do I want a RAF? Of course I do. Do I want a 50-metre pool? Of course I do. Do I want the city to go into $60 million debt? No, I don't. People, I think that the 5 councillors erred in not accepting the petition. I accept that. But their sole motivation was to act in the best interest of the ratepayers. For this, they should not be sanctioned. Personal attacks of this nature, which is what I've heard tonight, are never acceptable.
30 seconds left, Mr Wasdale.
Sorry?
30 seconds left.
Thank you. Personal attacks are not acceptable. In fact, they are quite distasteful. I think that we shouldn't even be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement. Folks, I did say no clapping, no interruptions. Please, I've been patient, I've given a few warnings, but if it happens again, I might have to start asking people to leave the meeting. I don't want to do that. Please follow the rules. So, with that, I'd now like to invite Mr. Keely Hodgson back to the microphone. Welcome again, and we look forward to your statement.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. Greg, I just want to correct you. It's Kylie, like in Kylie Minogue, but spelled differently.
My bad. My apologies.
Thank you. Thank you for, once again, thank you for letting me to speak tonight. I would like everyone to think why we have our councillors. As we are ratepayers, we have a chance to democratically vote in our councillors. We vote these people in to make the balanced decisions with the information they are given by the City of South Perth. These decisions need to be good for the City of South Perth and financially responsible, as the money they are voting to use is not theirs. It is the City of South Perth ratepayers. With the current rate increases on loans, the inflation rate increasing, cost of building increasing, anything and always going up, they need to make very hard decisions that are good for the City of South Perth ratepayers. Some of their decisions and how they vote are not going to please everyone, but they are being democratically voted in and are making financial decisions that will affect the City of South Perth for many years to come. I will like to finish off with, I have been disgusted with some of the items that have been posted on Facebook regarding the RAF, and a lot of half-truths which have been told. The lack of respect given to the councillors when they have been speaking at council. You can disagree with them, but laughing when they are talking is disrespectful and something I hope you don't teach your children. When you vote tonight, please think of the reasons why these councillors voted against the first RAF. It was not that they did not want it, it was about how can the City of South Perth fund the original project. And as of last week, the councillors voted for a 3-stage approach to the RAF, which is more financially responsible. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to invite Mr. Emmanuel Manolis to the microphone. Welcome to you, and we look forward to your statement.
I wanted to clarify what interest would be payable by the city when the city officer responded to a question at the meeting on the 1st of November. In the Standard Commonwealth Grant Agreement template... Sorry,
Mr. Manolis, is there any chance you might be able to take your mask off as you speak? I'm having trouble understanding you, and I don't know if anyone else is.
I would like to clarify what interest is payable by the city when the city officer responds to a question in the meeting on the 1st of November. In the Standard Commonwealth Grant Agreement template under definitions, it refers to the grant money received as the original sum and any interest the city had earned on that money. Is this the interest the officer was referring to in his reply, and also the interest that was basically part of the petition? Would this mean that there's not any penalty if the city had to return the principal and its interest they had earned on the grant money? In Section 11 of the template, it clearly states that if the money is not paid by the due date, penalty interest could be payable. How in this described scenario, where the grant money with interest earned is returned in full by the due date, would there be an increase in rates?
Sorry, is that a question or a statement, Mr. Manolis?
A lot of the, due to the, I guess, the way it's changed throughout the evening tonight, it's, I guess, changed in tone and somewhat in content.
I'm going to allow it, but it is a little bit out of order. Mr. Bradford?
Appreciate it, Mr. Mayor.
I think we might
Mr.
have to
Adams.
take that on notice.
Yeah. All right. Was that what you wanted to do?
It was, only because the evening's, I guess, agenda has somewhat changed to some degree with, the, I guess, the initial motion that was carried prior to, I guess, the councillors having a chance to talk.
Yeah. Is that everything that you wanted to say?
Yes, it is.
All right. Thanks very much. Okay. I'd now like to invite Mr. Greg Benjamin to the microphone. Welcome, and we look forward to your statement.
Hello, I'm a resident and ratepayer living at Norfolk Street, South Perth for over 30 years. In September 2020, I made a submission to Your Say South Perth where I supported the features offered by the proposed RAF. At an evening in the Civic Centre, the community were able to record key priorities for the RAF. Affordability was expressed as the most important criteria. In November 2020, a majority passed council resolution endorsed the business case for the RAF and importantly said the city stakeholder engagement has been expressly conducted on the basis that the RAF will be financially self-sustaining and will not result in an increase in council rates. In October 2021, the business case for the RAF was submitted to our state government. 12 months later, no formal response had been received. The 2022-23 state government gave no commitment to funding for this project. One has to wonder why, after several years of representations, the state government, with a surplus of $6 billion, could not give a commitment for at least a mere $20 million. Perhaps they are hesitant, as I hear swimming pools are costly and don't make money. In June 2022, at a council meeting, I asked what is the current expected total funding package for the RAF project. Given it was $80 million in 2020, considering inflation at least 7.6%, could it now be $100 million or higher? The answer I was given was the RAF is an $80 million project. No mention was made of scaling down the project. There has been little scrutiny about viability of the project as details have been redacted and feasibility updates not released. Given a funding shortfall uncertain to be at least $37 million and continued expenses by the city upwards of $1.7 million, in September 2022, I think it appropriate that the 5 councillors supported a well-considered, detailed motion making a reasonable request asking the state government to first respond to the city's submission from October 2021 before the city might proceed to incur further costs and project management for a project that had not been approved. Last week, the 5 councillors joined a unanimous vote to assess the RAF in 3 independent and financially viable stages. The City of South Perth then issued a news update under the heading "Council reaffirms its commitment to RAF," implying the RAF will be built rather than being assessed. Headlines like this, of which this is not the first, have, I think, irresponsibly whipped up and raised expectations. I'm here to express my confidence in the 5 councillors. As evident from their actions, including last week's unanimous vote, they are not opposed to the RAF project. It is erroneous and mischievous to say they have failed to implement the city's strategic community plan. Given the community expressed affordability is the most important criteria, given the council resolved that the RAF needs to be financially self-sustaining and no increase in rates, given the impact of inflation on cost and viability, and given a continuing funding shortfall of at least $37 million from prolonged lack of response from the state government, contrary to the views expressed by others, I believe the councils have acted in a fiscally responsible manner and have exercised good governance. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement. I'd now like to invite Ms. Cecilia Brooke back to the microphone. Welcome, and we look forward to your statement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I have quoted many times on behalf of Crossborough in Council, Crossborough has never been against a RAF, but the financial aspect of it has been a worry. Last week, it came up in somebody's deputation about the letter from Minister McMurray. I didn't realise it was coming up tonight, but I have here the letter to read to the people tonight that was written on the 5th of October 2020. It was addressed to Mr. Jeff Glass, the Chief Executive Officer of the time. Dear Jeff, I write to you in regards to correspondence I received from the Honourable Kate Doust MLC in relation to a perception expressed by a City of South Perth representative that the state government has committed to a funding contribution for the South Perth Regional Aquatic Facility, the RAF. This perception has been expressed to the Honourable Member by concerned local ratepayers. I would encourage the City to be open and transparent with residents about the projected capital and the recurrent costs of the RAF as soon as possible to allay their concerns. I have advised the Honourable Member that the RAF is not a part of the state government's forward planning agenda, nor is there a state government election commitment to fund this project. I hope I have provided some clarification. It was with deep regret that we found that this letter did not go to Council at all. And I do have the Honourable Kate Doust's permission to read this. And yesterday I touched base with somebody in the Minister's office to make sure that this letter, if I read it, did not intervene with the business case of the decision that is before the state government, and I was told it didn't, which is why I've read it tonight.
Thank you very much for your statement. I'd now like to invite Mr. Winston Choi to the microphone. Welcome, and we look forward to your statement.
Thank you, Greg. I'm Winston Choi. I live in Ranley Crescent in South Perth. I'd like to open by saying I've been a resident of the city for 46 years, so I have deep roots in the city. I attended local schools. My sons still attend a local school. I've been an active participant across multiple sports clubs in the city. And like everyone else I know, I think everyone in this room, would happily support a RAF and in fact would use it if it materialised. My concerns are that how fractured we are potentially in this room when clearly the lines dividing us are not that deep. I think in principle we do want a RAF, and I'd like to touch on two themes in my statement to the audience and to the council here. Firstly, the petition. I'm not sure I agree with the assertion of the city that the petition was presented in a valid manner. As other people have said, the petition was presented in their view and in my view in contravention of Standing Order 6.9. Furthermore, if it was not so, and the premise was that the petition was simply to be accepted, why in that case was it put to a vote? That gives an artificial sort of air that the petition itself could have been rejected. The standing orders are simply that, the standing orders. Greg, as the presiding member, there was no capacity to deviate from the standing orders. So therefore, I think with due process in the presentation of the petition not being followed, it has caused unnecessary angst throughout the community and placed the 5 councillors who voted against that in an invidious position. Furthermore, I think this conflation that in voting against the project manager and the petition, the 5 councillors were against the RAF, is very bizarre. It does not take into account the voting records of the 5 councillors with respect to the RAF. And here I can look at the voting records of the 5 councillors, including Councillor Manolis and Councillor Choi, who even in February 2021, on page 103 of the Ordinary Council Minutes, moved motions in support of the RAF. Furthermore, Greg, when you were campaigning for the mayoral position 3 years previously, part of the themes of your campaign were being financially
30 seconds left,
responsible
Mr. Choi.
and fiscally prudent. And you have at times voted against the RAF project back in September 2019, February 2021, and in August 2021. No petition arose against you, and rightly so. The councils exercise their due and bound duty to the various electors and ratepayers of South Perth, and for that I'm grateful to all 5 of them.
Thank you for your statement. I'd now like to invite Ms. Marcia Manolis to the microphone. Welcome, Ms. Manolis, and we look forward to your statement.
I'm Marcia Manolis. I live at 193 Mill Point Road, South Perth, and I've lived in the area for over 60 years. At the Ordinary Council meeting in September 2022, Mayor Milner, with the governance officer, created a situation where they advised councillors that there would be a further opportunity to vote on the petition, then denying the alternative motion, leaving the 5 councillors with no option to discuss the petition before casting another vote because the alternative motion was not allowed. I quote the Mayor addressing council. So if, for whatever reason, council votes not to accept the petition, you can move a motion once we don't accept it. Is that clear? These 5 councillors took the advice of the governance officer and the Mayor. They then voted no to the officer's recommendation, so the alternative motion would be presented. After the vote of no to accept the petition, the Mayor states, "I've now been informed by the governance that that does not require an alternative motion, resulting in no further discussion on the petition, leaving the councillors with a no vote." Councillor Manolis, under urgent business, and it's all on audio, again tries to state the reasons for the alternative motion. However, the Mayor denied again. This was in endeavour to put at rest some of the residents' interests. Councillor Manolis, at the special council meeting 1st of November 2022, states, "I do not oppose petitioners asking for council to review its decisions. Everyone has the right, and indeed it is healthy, to express alternative views." 5 councillors were denied natural justice after being directed by the governance officer and the Mayor on the process to put forward an alternative motion allowing discussion, and the petition accepted for the appointment of the project manager to be reconsidered. This is all available on audio
30
at
seconds, Ms Manolis.
500 and 315. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. I'd now like to invite Ms Sue Doherty to the microphone. Welcome back, and we look forward to your statement.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. Sue Doherty, 11 Burwood Avenue, Como. I'd actually like to address the words of the RAF petition, in particular when they were not accepted by Council, because they referred to some words they didn't agree with. I, at this point in time, would like to congratulate the Council for their recommendation they endorsed to proceed with the RAF in a 3-stage process. I believe, however, that this could have been expedited substantially earlier. And I want to speak to the statement in respect to the August and December meetings of 2021. In August 2021, there was a motion to Council which they deferred, and in respect to deferring it, they deferred the commencement of procurement process for the naming rights for the facility, and also noting the outcome of the procurement process for the naming rights partner were going to be presented to Council for endorsement. At this point in time, that hasn't happened, and I'm really interested to know why it hasn't. In terms of the concept and schematic design, there was a proposal to Council, and they chose not to accept it, and that was that actually the concept and schematic design will further refine the design of the RAF, provide more detailed information about the project design and costs, and actually test the RAF business model and operational financials. In terms of a decision for Council, which they chose not to make, the purpose of the officer recommendation presented in the report is significantly to de-risk the RAF process and provide Council with more detailed information to guide further decision making. A decision to proceed with the concept and schematic design is an investment in due diligence, as it will further test and refine the RAF business model. Perhaps one could say that by actually accepting that, the the business model and the schematic designs may have actually come to look at a 3-stage process. And for me, I'm concerned that that decision was not accepted, and I would put to you, when there is reference to continued indecision by the elected council,
30 seconds, Ms. Doherty.
That was one of the components that was included and taken into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that's all the public statements that were registered prior to tonight's meeting. There may be some public statements that were registered in the foyer prior to the commencement of the meeting. We'll get to those in due course. But we did also receive 2 motions prior to tonight's meeting. So any motion needs to be moved and seconded. The mover and the seconder are to approach the microphone and clearly state their names and addresses before reading their motion. Only the motions to be voted on are to be read out. So no preamble, no reasons, just the motion. Then it will be seconded, and then we'll put it to the vote here in the gallery. So with that, I'd like to invite Mr. Roger Riachi, if you'd like to come to the microphone. Yes. We do, but we're giving priority to those who have registered first. So we've done the public questions that were initially submitted, then the public statements. We're doing the motions now, then we'll come back to any other questions or statements, or indeed motions that haven't been considered yet. Yep. So, Mr. Riachi, welcome. If you'd like to read the motion that you'd like to move, please.
And councillors, my motion was to revise the current RAF project to propose change of location and scope of works. The new location would be the George Burnett Park on Manning Road, Karrawara. Stage 1 will be to construct a 50-metre pool with associated facilities utilising the pledged funds, federal funds granted. Stage 2, once further funds could be secured from either federal or state government, that a basketball facility would be designed and constructed.
All right, thank you very much for that. Is there anyone who would like to second Mr. Riachi's motion, being the motion on the screen at the moment? If you'd like to come to the microphone and please state your name and address.
Matthew Powell, Quell Court, Karrawara.
Thank you very much. And you're happy to second this motion? All right. So the motion on the screen right now has been moved and seconded. I'm going to put that to the vote. Could all those in favour please raise your hands and keep them raised until I ask you to lower them? If we can do a count there, please, Mr. Adams.
I don't think it's going to get up. It's the only way they're going to get a pool, though. I'll be asking a lot of questions. Hey. If they don't vote this, they're never going to get a 50-metre pool.
No.
$44, was it? 24, sorry. And all those against, please raise your hands.
Some people might have gone home.
45. All right. So the motion on the screen has been lost 24 votes to 45. Thank you both, gentlemen.
Thanks, Greg.
I'd now like to invite Ms. Marcy Manolis back to the microphone. And do you still wish to move your motion, Ms. Manolis?
We're not doing a no confidence motion now, are we?
That's why I'm asking you.
No, I'll retract it.
All right, thank you. All right, so that was the 2 motions that had been submitted prior to tonight's meeting. Are there any... Oh, sorry, Mr. Bradford?
Questions?
Oh, yes, we do have a number... Right, we have a fairly weighty package of potential questions here. I can see some have already been asked, but Miss Honey Webb, would you like to come to the microphone and either make a statement or ask your questions? I'm not sure which you'd like to do. And if you could please state your name and address, and then whether you're asking questions or making a statement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, or Greg, sorry. I've got to get used to addressing you. It's been really good coming here. I do have a few questions and probably a bit of a statement because I haven't prepared very well, but I have been doing a lot of listening and I'm good at that, been around doing it.
Would you like to lead with your questions, bearing in mind you've got 3 minutes to ask your questions and 3 minutes to make a statement?
Okay, my name is Honey Webb, Ankertel Street, Kensington. I'm here to represent myself, like everybody else in the community. I've lived in the area for over 40 years. I've used all the facilities, all the schools. Very keen in bettering our area together, and just wanted to ask a question that do our local councillors actually have confidence in their community to actually run a financial viable business plan for the RAF?
Sorry, I might get you just to repeat that question, please.
Does our local council, or have they done enough research to know the people in their community to have confidence in running a financially viable and profitable business plan for a RAF centre?
Okay, I can't sort of preempt a council vote, but we are getting...
Have we done any research to have confidence in local members, not taxpayers or ratepayers, just residents? Because I don't actually own my house. Neither do any of my family members, but...
I'm a bit confused. I'm not sure what the question is.
Okay, there's a lot of local residents that have been involved in schools and sporting facilities, so we understand and we've actually used them, and that's what our business is, and that's where I come from, my background, and also representing the part of the community that doesn't pay rates.
Right.
And also I'd like to represent and ask the local councils, it would be nice to have more representation of our community, because no disrespect here, I'm a grandmother myself, but is there anybody here that's like, you know, like in their 20s or 30s?
Well, we do have a councillor in our 20s.
Yeah, I understand him and I get him where he comes from, and I do appreciate your explanation, so I got your back. But that's what I'd like to know from you guys, because I've been around for a long time and put confidence in council members.
I might have to sort of call time on that one for the moment, just because I want to be fair to everyone.
And can we get more Indigenous representation for this kind of stuff, please? Because I am a local traditional custodian.
On the council, you mean?
Yeah, just for decisions like this.
It's up to the voters. We councillors are elected democratically. I don't have any real answer over and beyond that. Did you want to make your statement now?
I think I've covered it.
No worries.
Because I would like to see this go ahead, and I have been involved for a very long time, from a childhood age, like a lot of you mob. I am a Noongar, and I'd like to see the bigger picture, the vision, and let you guys know, have a bit of faith in us younger generation. We can make some money out of this, and you know, you ratepayers will be okay.
Thank you very much for your statement. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. I'd now like to invite... Oh, they've spoken. Spoken. Bear with me, folks. It's a fairly weighty tomb that I've got here. Spoken. Mr. Riachi, did you wish to ask any questions or make a statement? And then please come to the microphone, and you've already mentioned your name and your address, but perhaps you can let us know if you're asking questions or making a statement.
I'll be asking questions. Firstly, if the Mayor and the other councillors, don't want to leave you out, do you feel...
Could you pull the microphone a bit closer? I'm just having a bit of trouble hearing you.
Questions directed at you, Greg, and the rest of the councillors that haven't been answered any questions tonight. Do you think that this is a fair and democratic process to hold this meeting when a vast majority of the electors in this city have no idea that it's on?
It's been advertised in accordance with the Local Government Act, Mr Riachi.
But that's besides the fact. The only people that know about this are the people that are aware of the petition. I've spoken to lots of people, because I only found out about this a few days ago, and spoke to a few, and everyone thinks it's ridiculous that you can hold these people to ransom in front of an angry mob of people that are all here because they think they're going to lose a swimming pool, where in fact they're not aware of the actual facts that these guys are just doing their job. And the rest of the people, we've got our lives to live, and they haven't been able to get here for some unknown reason, or they're unaware of the process. The whole election, the vote against them was unfair. And
well,
it's not
Oliver, sorry, one question at a time.
That's to everybody.
I'll have a brief stab at that, and then I might invite Mr Bradford to sort of pick up on anything that I might have missed.
The councillors as well,
but the process for a special electors meeting is set out by the Local Government Act. That's state legislation. That's not City of South Perth legislation. That's state legislation that's been passed by the state parliament, government gazetted. We don't have a lot of discretion when it comes to whether or not we have a special electors meeting like this. If the requisite criteria to be satisfied under the Act are satisfied, and in this case they were, we are obliged to hold that meeting. We don't get to go, oh no, we don't think we want to do that. That's something we are obliged to do. In terms of notifying people of the special electors meeting, once again, these matters are prescribed, and to the best of my knowledge, the city has complied fully with those requirements. Is there anything that you'd like to add, Mr Bradford?
Yeah, that's right, Mr Mayor. There's public advertising in various forms. The notice of the meeting was posted on our website, and all of that is in compliance with the Act, and then the agenda was posted as well.
Thank you very much. Did you have another question?
Yes, I do. Do you think a vote of no confidence in the council or councillors is not worthy of sending a letter to everybody that's voted for these people?
Again, these things are legislated, Mr Riachi. We follow the legislation as we're obliged to do. Mr Bradford, is there anything that you'd add to that? No. Third question?
Yes, this one's to Mr Bradford. You've stated several times that a standalone pool at George Burnett not be viable. Can you please explain me and to the rest of the people here, and maybe even present something to the electors in the city, explaining and showing how the pool is any more viable on the golf course, when the people that go to the pool are there to swim, whether they want to swim at George Burnett or go to Collier Park, they're there to swim. The people that play golf are there to play golf, and if there's a basketball facility, the people that go to play basketball play basketball. And also, I understand there's a food and beverage facility to be built, Now, I don't know, but where I in my life, I've never seen anybody take their family out to dinner at a local pools, and I've never seen golfers sitting there having a beverage while kids run around with basketballs.
I think Mr Bradford's got the point of the question. If you'd like to answer that, Mr Bradford.
Just got an audience, mate. I just want to make my point.
Sure. So, we have analysed the costs of running facilities in conjunction with our various experts, and I don't have their details, but I actually listed them at the special council meeting. And there is a lot of evidence that supports the notion that a pool on its own runs at a loss. A 50-metre pool in an environment like ours, built with no other facilities, would run at a loss, an operating loss of between $500,000 and $1 million a year. That's pretty well accepted. So that deals with the first part. In terms of the location and food and beverage, the city's got a policy, a plan around our recreation facilities to provide multi-use facilities wherever possible. And that's in order to maximise the use and minimise the expenditure on capital assets in turn to maximise the use. Integrating a single facility at Collier Park is an example of doing just that. So yes, you're right, a food and beverage facility is required at a golf course. If we build a pool, you're going to require a food and beverage facility as well. And so by building a single integrated site, we can get better value out of a single food and beverage site, and I actually disagree. People do come for multiple purposes to these sorts of facilities, and I'll come to that in a moment, why that is. And so building a single integrated facility maximises the visitation, maximises the revenue, and minimises the operating capital. Good examples of integrated facilities, not quite what we're seeking to achieve, are Wembley Golf Course, which has mini golf course, driving range, food and beverage, function centre, and those sorts of things, and the Coburn Arc. And so there are good examples of how an integrated facility does maximise visitation, maximise revenue, and minimise operating and capital costs. And that's the model we're following.
Thank you very much, Mr Bradford, and thank you, Mr Riachi, for your questions.
Could I please ask just one more related question?
No, you've had 3 questions. I've got to be fair to everyone. There's a long list here I have to work through, but thank you. All right, so I've got the next name on the list is Ms Lorna Boys, and I've got unsure as to whether or not making a statement or question. If you'd like to come to the microphone. And folks, I am conscious that we've got a lot of names here. Perhaps consider, while you're waiting, if your question has already been answered this evening, because otherwise we're going to be here for a late night. Welcome, Ms Boys. Are you asking questions or making a statement?
Asking some questions.
By all means.
Thank you. So I live at Isabella Crescent in Manning, and I was unsure as to whether I'd ask a question. I thought I'd wait and see what else was asked today, but I do have a question and a couple of questions, and my first one is for Councillor De Souza. So you've been asked tonight some specific questions about who gave you the advice about the potential legal issues with the petition that you voted to reject. You've been asked who gave you that advice and what they've said, and in answer you referred to the reasons that you gave at the previous special council meeting last week. I was there, and you did not give the name of the person who gave you that advice, and you did not tell us what they said. You also you said you'd been forthright, and you asked what more you could do apart from giving your apology. So I'll ask again, what you can do to be forthright is to answer the question, who gave you that advice, what did they say? And if you're still concerned about legalities, you can take it from me, because I do have qualifications and experience in this area, that nothing that is true can be defamatory. So tell us the truth. Who gave you that advice? What did they say?
Councillor De Souza, did you wish to respond?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've answered the question.
Ms Boys, did you have any other questions?
Yes, I did. I had a question for each of Councillors Manolis, Troy and Navard. So in response to questions to you about why you rejected the petition, I think each of you referred to, among other things, an issue with the standing orders and an officer's report having not been provided when the petition was presented for consideration. And so my question is, why did you not raise a point of order to clarify that issue at the time? I know, Councillor Choi, I've seen you raise multiple points of orders during the process of previous debates. Why did you not raise a point of order to clarify that issue? Why did you simply vote to reject the petition?
Councillor Choi, did you wish to respond?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Ms Boyce, for the question. Look, I refer to the minutes and the audio of the council meeting of the 1st November 2022, wherein I addressed the matters raised by this question.
Councillor Manolis, did you wish to say anything?
Not at this point in time.
All right. Councillor Navard, did you wish to speak? No. Ms Boyd, did you have a final question?
Yeah, so my last one is a question for Councillors Manolis, Troy, Brendo Brandis and Navard. Again, I think when answering questions about why you rejected the petition, you each gave answers basically to the effect that you didn't agree with some of the statements in the petition, that you thought they were irrelevant or incorrect. You said that you didn't agree that there'd been delay or that there'd been indecision, etc. So my question is your petition that you should only accept petitions that you agree with? Because I put it to you that your role is actually to accept valid petitions. whether or not you agree with what is said in them, you still need to accept them and consider them.
Thank you for the question. Councillor Choi, did you wish to say anything?
I thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Ms Boys, again for that question. I believe I've already answered that question previously.
Thank you. Councillor Manolis?
Thank you for the question. It was never my intention to actually reject the petition. I welcome petitions. It is a healthy way to express views. I believe all petitions should be accepted by the city. I prepared an alternative motion to redact or remove what I considered inaccurate statements, still leaving the meaning of the petition that the appointment of the project manager be reconsidered by council, allowing the petition to be debated and voted. Standing Order 6.9, Clause 6.9 requires an officer's report to be included in the agenda before a vote, and the petition was not accompanied by an officer's report. As the tenders for the project manager expired on the 30th of June, the petition was unlikely it could be acted upon. Relying on the governance officer and the mayor that my alternative motion would be accepted for discussion once the officer's recommendation vote was taken, we were advised to vote no at the meeting. The governance officer then changed her advice and stated we do not require an alternative motion, that we don't accept the petition. To me, there appears to be a lack of natural justice for the 5 councillors who voted no on the advice of the mayor and the governance officer. I reiterate, councillors were expecting an alternative motion to be presented to review the petition and vote to accept the petition. Once again, at the end of the meeting, under urgent business, I requested, because of the interest of the community in the RAF, I be allowed to give my reasons for my alternative motion. I was once again denied. This can be heard on the audio recording. And I think I'll finish there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Manolis. Councillor Navard, anything to say?
I did actually clarify my position earlier this evening, where I didn't disagree. I was concerned about the assumptions and the fact that nothing appeared to be able to be progressed, but that was it. I didn't disagree with the petition.
Thank you, Councillor Navard. Councillor Brenda Brandis, anything to say?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you very much for the question. Earlier this evening, I articulated the reasons why I disapproved of some of the wording within the petition. I also articulated section 6.9 clause 3 as presenting a problem. On the evening, Councillor Manolis was prepared to propose an alternative, which would have probably been a better outcome for councillors to actually talk to the item and actually have a bit more transparency around their decision making, which would have been quite important. In addition to this, the specific performance of going back to the tenderer would not work, given that that expired on the 28th of June and this petition was after that date. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Brandis. And I think Mr Bradford wanted to clarify a point there.
Bear with me a moment.
I wouldn't mind clarifying a point as well.
Sorry?
So these are all reasons why you didn't accept the petition, because you didn't agree that what was being asked for in the petition could be delivered, or you didn't think it was appropriate, but it didn't stop you taking the petition to look at it. You could have disagreed with it later and said, we take your petition, but thanks, we are going to do what we like anyway.
I've got to be fair to everyone, Ms Boys. You have had your 3 questions, but
so
maybe Mr Bradford.
Just to be clear, the standing orders, as I mentioned earlier, are really broken into 2 parts. Petitions are listed on the agenda, and then subsequently they are dealt with under that clause 6.9 of the standing orders. In fact, the recommendation at the 27th September meeting was simply the petition received from George Watts of Yalambee Place, Karrawara, together with 2016 verified signatures and 58 unverified signatures in relation to the recreation aquatic facility, be forwarded to the relevant director for consideration. At a subsequent meeting, clause 6.9 would come into effect and a report would have been provided as it was.
Thanks, I agree with that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Bradford, and thank you, Ms Boys. So the next name on the list who hasn't already spoken is Annie Mitter, and I've got a question mark here as to whether or not Ms Mitter wants to ask a question or make a statement. Thank you very much. Okay. So, the next name on the list is Janet Shenton. Is Janet here? Janet might have gone home. Okay, I'll move on to the next name on the list. Okay, I think if I'm reading the handwriting right, the next name on the list is Jeff Griffiths. Is there a Jeff Griffiths here? No. I'll move on to the next name then. I've got Peter Scott with a yes here. Is Mr. Scott here? Welcome, Mr. Scott. And perhaps you can let us know if you're asking questions or making a statement, please. And remember to state your name and address.
My name Peter Scott, 47A McDonald Street. 47A McDonald Street, Como. I'm making a statement.
Please proceed. You have 3 minutes.
The original decision of Council was to support the RAF as long as it was self-funding and sufficient funds were raised to pay for its construction. There are serious doubts about the robustness of the business case and claims that it will operate on a break-even basis. The assumptions used to arrive at a conclusion that the RAF would be self-supporting are seriously flawed. This data needs to stand up to independent, rigorous scrutiny before any further funds are spent. The Deloitte review did not evaluate the assumptions and cannot be relied upon to claim the business case is reliable. The city has already spent over $1.7 million of ratepayers' money and has very little to show for it. There are many spurious claims within the business case, and these need to be open to scrutiny. The choice of location is one example. Curtin University called the shots on this, which saw the golf course being selected, and they have now withdrawn their proposed funding and should no longer have any input into the location. The George Burnett Reserve is by far a better location for many reasons, and council admin should accept that this would be a better outcome for all stakeholders. Another claim in the business case is that golf is on the wane, and therefore it is not important to retain the golf course in its current configuration. This is so obviously inaccurate that it is an outrageous claim that was included to justify the location decision. The golf course currently contributes $500,000 towards the coffers of the city, which negates the business case claims. The consultation process was totally inadequate. After developing a concept design, the city went through a promotional roadshow to sell their plan. There was no consultation. The so-called survey was actually a questionnaire that asked folk attending the promotional seminars if they would use a RAF. Of the 1,600 people who answered the question, 85% said that they would use a RAF. Somehow this has been translated by the zealots that 85% of the city residents
30 seconds,
want the
Mr.
RAF.
Scott.
Sorry?
30 seconds.
Sure. The administration has so far failed in their bid to raise sufficient funds to even meet the cost of the original estimate, let alone the actual cost that might happen. The 5 councillors have acted responsibly in delaying any further spending on this project until the final financial aspects are covered. The city needs to be more transparent and consultative with ratepayers. To keep pushing ahead without this scrutiny is irresponsible. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement. I'd now like to... I've got a possible question here from Mr. Adam Lucas. Is Mr. Adam Lucas still here? No. Okay. I've got I don't know if they're separate motions, but Ross Cresswell and Lauren Cresswell have indicated they'd like to move a motion. Is Mr. and Mrs. Cresswell here? I'm going to take that as a no. That's already been done. I've got a statement here from Edward Prendergast. Is Mr. Prendergast here? No, we're ripping through these now. All right, we've heard from them. What does that say? I have a signature here in the place of where someone's indicating whether they're making a statement or a question. I think it's Andy D'Souza. I can't quite make out the handwriting here. Andrea D'Souza? Councilman D'Souza, do you know if there's anyone here with...
Someone putting their hand up.
Oh, there you are. My apologies. No, I think you've signed. Then by all means, please come to the microphone. And perhaps if you can state your name and your address and then please ask your question.
Hi, I'm Andrea D'Souza from 15 Cygnus Parade, Waterford. And my question is to the Mayor. Can I ask, if the state government does not fund the project, will this go ahead? And can you guarantee that our rates will not go up?
Well, if the state government ultimately doesn't provide any funding, that will be a decision for council. That's not a decision I can make unilaterally. And I might invite Mr. Bradford to clarify the next part of the question, but my understanding is the RAF has always been information gone out to the populace on the basis that it will be financially self-sustaining and there will be no impact on council rates as a result of the recreation and aquatic facility.
That's correct.
And it looks like there's nothing to add to that.
Okay. Can I ask another question?
Please.
Yeah, just based on that. Since we have not got state government funding and you're saying council rates will not go up, then what is the other alternative? What are the other sources of funding you are looking at? Or hence, why is this discussion going on?
Mr. Bradford?
So the council decision, was it last week, breaking the project up into 3 stages allows it to proceed with stage 1 potentially without state government funding, and subsequent stages with external funding. So, and they will all be considerations for council and future decisions for council.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. I now have Ms. Sue Gilliott. Is she here? No, she's gone. Okay. All right, moving on. And Mr. Matthew Powell, there's indication here that you'd like to ask a question and make a statement. You've got 3 minutes for both. Welcome back. And perhaps you'd like to start with the question.
Thank you. Matthew Powell, and I live in Karawara. My first question appears already to have elicited a response through Zane Richter, and I'll thank him for that, in relation to why the 5 councillors changed their position, and thank you for the clarity. What I would like to ask, if maybe one of the councillors could confirm that the change in position is a direct result of a more favourable financial impact to ratepayers by rolling this project out in stages as opposed to one.
Don't know if any one councillor is able to answer that.
Or all 5?
Well,
just trying to streamline it.
Councillor D'Souza?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Powell, for the question. That is correct. The revised proposal, at least speaking from my perspective, is a lot more financially responsible because having it across 3 stages mitigates the risk that any one stage could go wrong. And I take assurance from the CEO's advice that each stage will be independently verified and have its own business case. So basically the answer is yes.
Thank you. My next question, in light of that, why is it that we voted in order to roll out stage 1 in the order that it's rolled out, and that the 50-metre pool is going to be stage 3? Is there a reasoning behind why that is going to be the final stage?
Sorry, could you repeat that question, please?
Could I get some clarification as to why the order of the rollout, the information I've seen is that the 50-metre pool is going to be in stage 3. Is there a reason why that's in stage 3 and not stage 1?
I think that question was probably answered in the officer report for the special council meeting for the from last week, the 1st of November. Thank you very much for your... Did you have any further questions, or...?
No, I don't have any further questions. If I could just make a brief statement.
Please, you have 3 minutes.
Okay. I noted the recent words of Councillor Saladin on social media. After the vote for the motion failed in relation to the project manager, he said, "Play the game, not the player." In light of last week's unanimous decision to support the RAF in stages, can we now all draw a line in the sand and move on? Some of the social media vitriol calling for the 5 councillors to be punished at the next LGA elections, and with some so-called group or subject matter experts encouraging community members to make petty code of conduct complaints against those 5 councillors, it's counterproductive and it goes against the spirit of Councillor Saladin's wise words. If we want the RAF to go ahead with the full support of the community and our councillors, we all need to be on the same page and we need to be supporting our councillors, not undermining them. With this in mind, I would propose that we could move a motion that electors do have confidence in all councillors so that they can continue to represent their constituents with the confidence of knowing that they enjoy our support to do so.
So is that a statement or is that a motion that you're moving?
Well, it's a statement, but it can be a motion if it's...
There hasn't been a motion of no confidence in anyone, so if you're happy with that as a statement, that's probably easiest. At this point, I am conscious that it is starting to get on in time. Is there anyone who hasn't already sort of spent their time asking questions or making a public statement or moving a motion or whatever that would like to do so, bearing in mind that some of the questions might have already been answered? I can see Mr. Robert Mitchell in the front row there, and there's... Oh, sorry, I'm told the lady in the green shawl. Yes, Ms. Kalis, is it? If you'd like to come to the microphone. My apologies, Mr. Mitchell, we will get to you. Sorry, the way you were sitting, Mr. Bradford could see you easier than what I could, so I apologise for if you have had your hand up for a while. If you'd like to state your name and your address and let us know if you're asking a question, making a statement or moving a motion.
It will be a question, maybe 2. Thank
Fire
you,
away.
Mayor. Thank you, councillors, for allowing me to ask the question. Can you tell me who is championing this project? Who is there that really wants it to happen, that is leading it?
I'm not sure how to answer that, since all decisions are considered by council on a case-by-case basis. What were you trying to elicit?
What I'm trying to say is a project officer is a person who is going to champion it, who is going to move it forward, who's going to give the rationale, who's going to make it happen.
Mr. Bradford, are you able to perhaps have a crack at answering that?
So we've got a project governance arrangement inside the city with a number of people working on the project, and I guess ultimately I'm the one that brings all of that together and presents it to council.
I might add that as far as council goes, council sets a strategic community plan which lets the administration know these are the key outcomes that we'd like to see at the City of South Perth over the next 10-year period. That was universally endorsed by council at the December 2021 Ordinary Council meeting.
Yeah.
The administration then presents, if that's sort of the broad plans of the outcomes we want, then the administration presents options to council, presents items on the agenda for council's consideration, attempting to achieve those goals. Does that make sense?
It does, but so the role of the project officer then is what?
Mr. Bradford?
Well, to carry out the instructions of council and to go through the appropriate processes to build the business case and what other work is required and bring it forward to council for decision. And then we diligently will implement council decisions.
Okay, all right.
Did you have any further questions, or was that both of them? Thank you so much. Mr. Mitchell, I saw you had your hand up before. If you'd like to state your name and your address and let us know if you're asking questions, making a statement or moving a motion.
Bob Mitchell from 2 Fortune Street, South Perth. I'd like to make a brief statement and ask 2 questions.
Please proceed.
My statement has been partially covered by other people in terms of respect shown for councils. and all members of staff. I believe that even tonight is a really good example of the time and the effort and the consideration that's been put in by our South Perth City Council. I commend you, even though we've had our differences, and I don't necessarily share all your views, Mr. Mayor, but I think that you've actually handled it quite well. The only thing that I would not agree with was putting that first amended motion without any consideration, which to me did not really smack of democracy. So I'd just like to put on the record that I would hope that in the future you might consider able to at least have some views put contrary to a motion before you actually put it to a vote. So that's just a statement. I don't need your response. Thank you. My question to Mr. Bradford. As the Chief Executive Officer, you have stated tonight that the $20 million that the Council has committed is still an in-principle amount. It is an in-principle commitment. It's not actually a line in the budget. And I think your statement was Council will decide how to raise that money at a future date. So is it true to say that as it now, the $20 million in principle commitment to this RAF project is an unfunded item?
Mr. Bradford, did you need clarification on that question, or?
It is a $20 million commitment. The council has many choices of how to finance and fund that. We have funding in reserves, we could do borrowings, etc. The business case is based on a worst case scenario. It includes that as a borrowing. But when we actually present a project budget to council, the financing of that $20 million commitment will be considered as part of that proposal. And at that point, the council will consider the best option in terms of the available to finance the $20 million commitment.
Thank you. Did you have another question, Mr. Mitchell?
Yes. My second question relates to the good decision made last week in terms of putting this up for a consideration for stage 1 coming back in March 2023 with more meat on the bone. But what I'd like to ask is, will that process allow the latitude of looking at least at 2 sites rather than just relating it to the Collier Park Golf Course? Because I honestly believe that by getting stage 1, which is the cherry-picked profitable side of the RAF project, you are in fact getting a foot in the door at Collier Park Golf Course without necessarily having a major reason later on to have that as your site.
Council has decided on the site, which is the Collier Park Golf Course. That, before my time at the city, that was in 2019. I have read the documentation associated with that site decision extensively. Council considered in depth 17 possible sites across the city, and for various reasons, not just Curtin University, Collier Park Golf Course was chosen as the preferred site. I believe that still stands. I'll also add that the Commonwealth funding is tied to that site as well.
Is that a fact? The Commonwealth has tied their funding to Collier Park?
We were required to identify the parcels of land where the project would be executed.
That is new information to a lot of people.
Oh, we're glad you've got it now. And thank you very much for your questions. Okay, is there... Oh, I see the gentleman in the blue shirt. I don't actually know your full name, but... well, you've got to state your name and your address. That's the rules.
No,
No, it's got to be your proper name.
House Marin, that'll do. Now, I live at Norfolk Street around the corner there. Now, first of all, I want to congratulate all the people here. They've done a fantastic job. Even though the CEO bloke looks like he's had a real hard day there, he looks like he's fallen asleep. He's done a great job. But Mr Milner, I think well, it's true, he's done a hard yards. But Mr Milner, I have full confidence in him as the mayor. And I came today with a different view, that the RAF project should proceed full steam. And after listening to the people, I actually backed the council that they shouldn't be overspending money that they haven't got. Now, to pre-cure this, there is another meeting at the moment at the cricket ground, exactly the same thing. They're going over money that they shouldn't be spending for exactly the same thing. There's a pool involved there as well. So I highly recommend that people because remember, the money you're spending is everyone's money. So I highly recommend that you keep going on the line of just being cautious. So I actually congratulate you people about that, now that I'm here, and Mrs. Choi. One thing I will say, just from sitting back there listening, there seems to be a bit of a lack of communication between the people here and the people there. So, like, for example, the other day I'm in these two people's constituents. I got a letter in my letterbox to say, come and have coffee with us. But it was 3 hours before it was going to happen. So I think that they should, every councillor maybe, have a little meeting with their constituents every month for 2 hours. And even Mr Bradford, I've asked to be meeting him twice. I got into the White House quicker than I got in to meet him. I still haven't met him, actually. So what my point is, I think that it'd be great to be more open dialogue with people, so that way the more communication you can give the people, that will discount the lack of concern from that end, I would have thought.
Thank you very much for your statement. Okay, I thought I saw a couple of hands. Mr Hodgson, you have asked questions and made a statement. Are you moving a motion? If you'd like to come to the microphone then, please. And if you could please let us tell us what the motion is.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, councillors. I'd just like to move a motion that the electors do have confidence in our 5 councillors: Blake De Silva, Andre De Brandis, Jennifer Narvata, Ken Malolis, and Mary Choi. I apologise for the mispronouncing of your names.
All right. Governance team, should we get that up on the screen, or should we just go with it? We don't have the ability. Okay, so repeat that one more time so that everyone can hear it nice and clear.
Moving a motion that the electors do have confidence in the 5 councillors: Blake De Silva, Andre De Brandis, Jennifer Nevada, Ken Manolis, and Mary Choi.
All right. Is there anyone who wishes to second that motion? I think I saw Mr Scott's hand go up first there. And Mr Scott, if you could state your name and address one more time, please.
Yes, Peter Scott, 47A McDonald Street in Como, and I second that motion.
All right. So the motion has been moved and seconded. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands and keep them raised. All right, and all those against, please raise your hands and keep them raised. All right, so that motion was carried 40 votes to 12. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to ask questions, make a statement or move a motion? I saw an arm down the back there. Yep, that's right, sir. If you'd like to come to the microphone. I think it's Mr De Torres. But If you'd like to come to the microphone and state your name and your address and let us know if you're asking questions, making a statement or moving a motion.
Thank you, Mayor, councillors, and...
Sorry, it's Doctor, isn't it? I forgot that last time, didn't I?
I was going to correct you, but I thought,
Yes,
why bother?
it is Doctor. My apologies.
My name is Paul de Torres. I live at 21A Pether Road, Manning, and I would like to propose a motion, and it's based on the fact that what has transpired this evening, it is clear that the motion we voted on initially was without all the relevant information, and I would like to make a motion that converts Mr. Mitchell's statement to a motion, and I propose a motion that in all future electors' special meetings and electors' annual meetings, that when a motion is proposed, the voting electors have the opportunity to hear the arguments for and against the motion before voting.
Is there anyone who wishes to second that motion? I think I saw Ms Brooks' hand go up first. Ms Brooks, if you'd like to come to the microphone, state your name and address.
My name is Cecilia Brooke. I live at Unit 8, number 20 Garden Street, South Perth, and I support the motion.
Thank you very much. So the motion has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please raise your hands and keep them raised. And all those against, if you could please raise your hands and keep them raised. All right, that was easy to count. All right, so that motion was passed, 33? In favour? 35. 35, sorry. 35 votes to 2. Thank you, Dr. de Torres.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question? The gentleman in the front row there. If you could let us know your name, your address, and whether you'd like to ask a question, make a statement or move a motion.
Mike Whitley, number 2A, Westland Place, Waterford. Mr Mayor and councillors, I just wanted to point out something. Sorry. I just wanted to point out something that I've observed on the other couple of aquatic centres that are in the area. One is Victoria Park and the other one is at Canning.
Sorry, I might get you to move your mouth a bit closer to the microphone. I'm having trouble hearing you.
Is that better?
That is a bit better, yeah.
Okay. Just to make an observation about the aquatic centres in... thank you. Disobedient microphone, sorry. The aquatic centres in Victoria Park and also in Wharf Street in Cannington are both quite large pools, a facility in and out of the building, but they're covered. Therefore, you could have 365 days of use of it. The City of Canning actually canned the pool, which was outdoors, along Manning Road some years ago and incorporated that at Wharf Street into a new aquatic centre. That perhaps should be taken into consideration when you're doing the planning and the feasibility study of 1, 2 or 3 stages. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to... I can see... Is that Mr Watts at the back there? It is. So you have made a statement, Mr Watts, but you can ask questions or you can move another motion, if you wish.
It's George Watts, 10 Yalambee Place, Carrawarra. I've just got 3 questions that came up of tonight. First question, I believe, is probably Mike. Now, can you tell me what the motion on, whenever it was in September, to considering the petition, what the wording was? In my mind is that the petition received from Mr George Watts of Yalambee Place, Carrawarra, together with 2016 verified signatures in relation to the Recreation Aquatic Facility, RAF, be forwarded to the relevant director for consideration. Is that the motion?
That was the officer recommendation. Yes.
So does that form the motion that gets voted on? It's a genuine.
That was the officer recommendation that was voted on by council.
Okay. I'd like to now, through the mayor, ask someone that hasn't said anything tonight, Councillor Cridland, if I could ask you a question.
Please
I'll
proceed.
ask you first, and then you ask.
Address it to me, and then I'll ask Councillor Cridland.
Like I asked Councillor Cridland, that motion, what part of that motion, as a councillor considering it, do you need to look at the wording of the petition?
Councillor Cridland.
Is there reference there to where you have to look at the wording of the petition? Because there's been a lot of talk about it. Sorry. There's been a lot of talk about the wording, and it dawned on me that wasn't what the voting was about.
All right. I might ask Councillor Cridland if he'd like to respond to that.
I'm happy to respond to that. Firstly, I'd say I'm glad I was still awake. Secondly, you have taken me by surprise. Thirdly, I'll do what everyone else has done, and I'll thank you for your question.
Good stalling.
While I work out. No, there is absolutely no need to look at the wording of a petition. All you're doing is forwarding it to the officer for the officer to look at it and then work out what goes in the report that goes back to council. You're doing nothing more than the administrative step of just saying we've received it as a council. So I never have looked at the wording, I never would. You would simply accept it and then send it to the officer to do what they always do, deal with the administrative stuff, provide us with a report.
So to clarify, nothing in that motion indicates that you need to be concerned or look at the wording?
No, why would you?
And third question, and again, it does involve all councillors now. The question I'd like to ask is, there was reference, it doesn't include you, Councillor De Souza, you've already answered the question. Councillor De Souza referred to legal advice received 20 minutes prior to the meeting in September. My question to all council members, did you receive the same advice? And if so, are you able to say where that advice came from?
Councillors, does anyone want to respond to that question? Councillor Cridland?
I must have misheard. I'm not aware of any legal advice. I don't recall.
No,
Did you clarify what legal advice I'm talking about? Is that concerned about the question?
Maybe I'll have a stab myself. I don't recall receiving any legal advice on that question prior to the meeting. Is it possible that you've slightly misunderstood Councillor De Souza's answer to some previous questions?
I don't believe so. The answer Councillor De Souza gave was that he'd received advice 20 minutes prior that raised concerns that the petition was defamatory and therefore shouldn't be accepted, and he erred in that judgment. So my question to all councillors and yourself, Mayor Greg Milner, is did all councillors and yourself, Mayor, you're still a councillor, aren't you, receive that same advice?
Well, I certainly didn't. Councillor De Souza?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I might just clarify for Mr. Watts. I never said anything about getting legal advice. What I said in my explanation was I made a mistake in the way I interpreted the motion. That was the substance of my explanation last week, and that's what I've reiterated today. The mistake was mine alone in the way I interpreted the motion. So that's the answer.
Clarify my question. I did actually exclude you
Mr. Watts, I have to be fair to everyone. That is 3 questions.
But I did exclude him from the question, and the question was the advice to others.
Yeah, I've got to be fair to everyone, Mr. Watts. I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you for your questions. Councillor Russell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to answer that question regarding, your first question regarding the wording of the petition and the motion, what actually makes up the motion. So I saw that the petition and the recommendation as being one as being a motion, and the motion was a formal motion, not a procedural motion, but a formal motion. Formal motions have due regard in the standing orders, which are separate to a procedural motion.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Thank you for your questions, Mr. Watts. Councillor Manolis, sorry, I didn't see your hand before.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the question, Mr. Watts. I can categorically say I did not receive a legal opinion myself from just before the meeting on the whenever the date was for the petition, 27th of September, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Manolis. Did anyone else want to respond to Mr. Watts' question about legal advice or not receiving legal advice? Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Watts. I could also confirm that I didn't receive any legal advice with regard to that matter.
Anyone else? No. Thank you for your questions, Mr. Watts.
Thank you.
All right. Is there anyone else who wishes to ask any questions or make a statement? Mr. Riauchi, I think you have moved a motion, made a statement. Had you asked questions? Yes, he has. You've had your time, Mr. Riauchi. I can't. I've got to be fair to everyone. Is there someone? Mr. Richter, you've asked questions, but you can make a statement or move a motion if you would like.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. This will be a quick statement. I've just been processing some thoughts about developer contribution plans in the City of South Perth. I understand these to be...
I might stop you there, Mr. Rector. Any statements or questions or motions have to relate to the purpose of the meeting, which I outlined earlier. More than happy to have a chat with you later about developer contribution schemes, but that's not on the table for tonight.
It relates to... in the DCP, it relates to funding for recreation and community facilities?
Not the RAF, it doesn't.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Does someone else wish to make any questions, make a statement, move any motions? Mr. Riauchi, you've done all three already. Sorry, what? No, Mr. Riauchi, you've had your time, but you're more than welcome to engage with any of us afterwards if you'd like. Is there anyone else? No. Okay. In that case, before I close this meeting, I would like to advise that any decisions made at the electors meeting are to be considered by Council in accordance with Section 5.33 of the Local Government Act 1995. At this point in time, it's anticipated that the minutes from this meeting will be considered at the Council meeting to be held on Tuesday, the 22nd of November, 2022. I'd like to thank everyone for your attendance and participation this evening. I now close the electors' special meeting at 8 minutes past 9 p.m. And once again, thank you for your attendance and participation. Good night.